Long ago, the Duke of Milan commissioned a little-known artist to erect a mammoth statue of a horse. The time was 1481. The artist was Leonardo da Vinci. The guy on the donkey is just a guy on a donkey.
I have a name, Todd.
Greetings, friends. Welcome back to Critically Acclaimed, the movie review podcast where highbrow and lowbrow collide! A fiery explosion of death.
Oh no!
My name is Witney Seibold. I am a film critic for the entirety of the internet. You publish once on the internet, that makes you an internet critic for the whole thing.
You're an internet celebrity.
I'm an internet sensation.
Did you see? I'm on the internet.
I was published on the internet.
Ooh. They don't just let anyone on Twitter.
No. Did you hear? I posted a comment on 4chan.
No, you didn't.
No, I didn't.
No.
I stay far away from 4chan.
Please do.
Who are you?
I'm William Bibbiani. I'm also a film critic for the internet. Everybody calls me Bibbs, and this week on Critically Acclaimed, we're reviewing... you'd think, after, Avengers Infinity War, there'd be, nothing coming out the week afterwards. There's a ton of movies out this week.
Oh, yeah.
Many of them are smaller films, but we're reviewing a whole bunch of them. So this week, we're going to be reviewing the new releases Overboard, Tully, Bad Samaritan, Manhunt, Ghost Stories, and Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell.
That would be Tremors Part 6 for those of you keeping score.
And we're also going to be reviewing our double feature of the week. You chose on the Schmoville Facebook page one of the most notorious box office bombs in history, the alchemy heist comedy Hudson Hawk, and we're pairing that with an unusual choice for a double feature, but it's a movie we're huge fans of, and we can't wait to tell you how great it is because it's not talked about enough. But before we get to that, new releases. And I think I think in the wake of Avengers, nothing's really the big release of the weekend, but probably the one that's been getting the most publicity is Overboard.
I suppose. Maybe? Question mark? This is a remake of a film that came out in the mid to late 80s.
I think 87?
86 or 87, around there.
Yeah.
The original starred Kurt Russell as a kind of blue-collar single dad with a bunch of kids who found himself in the orbit of Goldie Hawn, who was a really horrible rich socialite and treated him very badly. She falls off a boat and loses her memory, hence the title, Overboard. He, in order to play a kind of sick prank on her...
Well, he thinks he's okay. The plot is he's getting some sort of karmic revenge because she was mean to him, she destroyed his job or whatever, and so he, in an idea that could only work in a movie like this, and frankly doesn't work even in a movie like this, convinces her, this amnesiac, that he is her husband, and basically forces her to do all of the housework. It was a hit at the time. It's well remembered by many people.
I saw it in theaters at the time.
I did too, and let me tell you something, it is now, and always was, gross.
Really, really gross. I don't recall that. It's been a while since I've seen the original Overboard, so I don't recall if they ever addressed sort of the sexual aspect of it. They're supposed to be a married couple.
I don't remember how.
How do you finagle your way into shit? No, they deal with this in the remake. I don't remember how they did with it in the original. It doesn't matter because it's a creepy idea anyway.
No matter how you slice it, it's kidnapping.
It's kidnapping somebody,
it's fraud,
and forcing them to be a slave.
More or less.
Yeah.
It's really a creepy, weird concept.
Now, in the original, it's especially creepy because it's a man enslaving a woman. Now, in this one, they tried to take the curse off of it by swapping genders. In this new remake, the Kurt Russell character is played by Anna Faris. And the Goldie Hawn character is played by Eugenio Derbez, who I'm not terribly familiar with, but who I understand is a terrifically successful comedian.
Okay.
He is, and the premise is exactly the same. He's a rich, horrible man. She's a single mom trying to make ends meet. He treats her badly. He falls off his boat, gets amnesia. She goes to the hospital and claims he is her husband and makes him her slave. Shenanigans ensue. Which should have been the title of the movie.
It's the title of many comedies.
The title of many comedies, really.
Shenanigans. Have you seen Shenanigans Ensue number 3093? It's not as good as number 3612, but it's still pretty good. Yeah.
I used to write that phrase in my reviews a lot when I was in my 20s.
Me too.
Shenanigans ensue. You know what's going to happen. It's really kind of a limp comedy, this remake.
Yeah.
I feel like the strengths come, strangely, not from Anna Faris or Eugenio Derbez. I think they're kind of doing their due diligence, but they're playing so broad that they don't come across as real people, and yet they're not allowed to get so dark and edgy with the material that it feels like it has any kind of personality. It's all really, really safe.
I would love to see, like, because that's my problem with this Overboard, and even the other Overboard. Like, if you want to do this, fine. Approach and deal with how dark the material is. Like, there is a dark comedy to be made about this. Like, almost a bleak comedy to be made about this. And I would love to see
Peter Berg on the case.
Early Peter Berg. Like, very bad things, Peter Berg.
Not Battleship Peter Berg.
Or even the Coen brothers. There's just someone with a real mean streak to deal with this. You might have been able to do something with this, but everyone's just trying to take this idea, which is just fundamentally not funny. Like, I'm amazed anyone remade it. I know it was a hit, but like it was a long time ago. And they wanted to make it fun for the whole family, and that's the real problem, because they can never address the elephant in the room. And so all we really get here is the cast charming? Are they charming enough to make you forget about it? And I'm going to say this, sometimes they're good. I think Anna Faris is one of our most underappreciated comedic actors, period.
She is this generation's Lucille Ball in many ways. She can play madcap and make it convincing in a way that many other comedians of her generation just can't.
I think she's really fantastic at it, and if anyone can sell the premise, it's her, and she does the best she can.
Find the film Smiley Face, the Greg Araki film she made. I've mentioned it a lot, but that's kind of her moment to shine.
I think Eugenio Derbez does a really good job of trying to take this guy who should be just this one-dimensional Looney Tune villain. He's just selfish and crappy. And what he does is he makes him such an infant. Like, he's so like he's never had to do anything. There's a point where he's
inherited his fortune. He's never worked at all.
And there's this one point where he asks her, like, "What am I in the mood for? Mango? Papaya? Excuse me, what am I in the mood for?" Like, he has no idea. He can't even make that decision for himself. So, like, that transition as he, like, ends up, like, doing housework and physical labor for a living, and he actually, like, has some soulful moments where he actually, like, he has amnesia, but he's still got elements of his personality intact. He actually makes that work better than I thought. The problem with the whole amnesia plot, beyond the obvious that it's creepy, though, is that it's not funny to see him get this poetic justice punishment if he doesn't remember what he did.
Yeah.
He doesn't remember being rich, and this hurts him. Like, that would be funny if he was constantly shamed. Like,
if it's like a magical realism thing where just no one recognizes him all of a sudden. Like, I've seen movies like with Jim Belushi with premises like that. Where now I wake up and I'm in the body of somebody else. Like, that sort of magical thing.
John Hannah, who was the comic relief brother in the Mummy movies, the 1990s, early 2000s trilogy. He plays Eugenio Derbez's valet. And John Hannah's a funny actor. He's an actor I'm always surprised isn't a bigger star than he is. I like him a lot.
He is in England. He's just not here.
I'm surprised he never, like, became, like, the next Hugh Grant or something over here. He's a very, very talented guy, and he steals a couple of scenes. He doesn't have a lot of great lines of dialogue, but, like, a part of me was just like, I think it would almost have been funnier just to take those two actors and, like, do a thing where Eugenio Derbez gets amnesia and John Hannah convinces him he's the butler.
There you go.
And then there's some karma to it. And then there's, like, some lifelong sort of turmoil.
Resentment going on.
That almost would have been funnier because, if you're being punished for something, if Bugs Bunny punishes a guy, the guy knows he did something wrong, and it's just pride getting in the way. Here, she's just taking advantage of him, and it's not terribly funny. But for me, the real winners here are the supporting cast.
There's
Ava Longoria has a surprisingly small role. I honestly think she could have carried the movie, but she plays Anna Faris's best friend, who has all the lame ideas. Like, the idea to kidnap this guy is her idea. She sells it better than I ever thought anyone could.
When she tries to cover for Anna Faris, she comes up with, like, the most horrific stories. It's like it turns out, why are their panties in the trunk? Well, it turns out I've been having all these affairs. Wait, why did you do that? It was such a stupid thing to admit. But I wish I forgot
her husband.
Her husband,
Bobby, is played by Mel Rodriguez.
Mel Rodriguez
is really funny in this. And this is the tragedy of a movie like this, where just the setup is just so. And people say, like, oh, why can't you just, like, just enjoy the comedy? Why do you keep thinking about the setup? I got a lot of comments on my review of this film, my print review. And it's like, because the setup is what makes it not funny. Now, I can appreciate that if you're, quote unquote, turning your brain off, you might be able to enjoy this movie.
What does that even mean? Go into a coma? I hate that.
Well,
phrase.
I don't think anyone should be proud of turning off their brain. And I think even a dumb movie you should be able to enjoy without insulting your own intelligence. For me, I'm at a point, and this is why we have critics. The point is to have good taste, I hope. And from my personal taste, and yours apparently as well, is the setup is just so danged icky that I can't quite find most of it funny, even though there are individual moments that are funny. And again, a lot of the cast, in particular the supporting cast, is really good. Like you can't write the movie off entirely. It's just a mistake.
There is also a kind of icky racial dimension that the film doesn't quite address.
Never addresses it.
Because Eugenio Derbez and all of his family, they're all Latino and Latinas, and she's a white woman who is essentially enslaving a Latino man. And that's not really ever addressed.
Again, a darker, sharper, more intelligent comedy would have addressed that, and you could have done something with it. It might have been gross, too, but at least they would have had something to say.
It would have been gross, but they would have been butting it head on rather than just sort of glossing over this kind of icky racial dimension.
That's my point. Like, they would have had something to say about it.
Now, of course, over the course of the film, Eugenio Derbez kind of becomes the missing dad figure that this household has been missing. And he becomes very, very good at being a domestic and being a worker.
And I actually buy the transition. I think he's a good enough actor that I actually buy his transition.
Yeah, and that he actually starts bonding with these daughters, and that the daughters are in on it is an extra creepy dimension. Why are these kids are being forced to pretend that this man is their father?
And there's this moment when Anna Faris actually like tries to tell him, like, I can't deal with it anymore. Listen, you're not my husband and everything. And the daughters are just like, what are you talking about? It's our dad. He's been our dad for forever. I'm like, what is going on? Weird.
And then she would have gone to the courthouse. No, look, there's no actual paperwork. Wait a minute, there is paperwork. Wait a minute. How long have we been married? And it turns out she had amnesia this whole time. And
that would have been a good twist.
Switcheroo.
Okay, I wish I would have really liked that. Was funny.
That would have been great. Sadly, that
would have been a great idea.
That does not happen in the movie.
Wow, that would have been amazing.
I know. Wouldn't have been great if they kind of did a little switcheroo on you?
Yeah, like a Twilight Zone episode.
But there's this conceit that floats around a lot of Hollywood comedies that I think kind of dampens most of them. And you see this all the time, where a lot of people who have to pretend to be couples or have to pretend to be a family or pretend to be married couples will eventually succumb to the domestic unit. That the implication with all of these comedies is that the American nuclear family is such an overpowering social force that even masquerade of that thing will cause you to be that thing. And I'm not sure how comfortable I am with this message still being sold to us, that we need to have a very kind of traditional nuclear family. Even if it's a false one, it's going to become true.
There's something you could say there about a cult mentality, about that sort of acceptance of having... Well, and what's weird is that, to be fair here, Leo is the character Eugenio Derbez plays. He has a family.
Yeah,
they're not a close family. In fact, there's a recurring gag that a lot of
their lives are like a telenovela.
Yeah, there's like a bunch of characters in the film who are watching a telenovela over and over again. And a telenovela, it's a soap opera. It's very broad. It's huge plot points. And I feel like one of the reasons they incorporate this element is to try to take the curse off the concept. Like, see, these things happen.
And, our life is like this soap opera. It's not really gracefully presented.
No, in fact, there's one point where someone literally yells it. This is like in a telenovela. Yeah, we get it. Thank you. You've done it a bunch of times. But my thing is this. If you're going to do that, you could have actually almost gotten away with that if the entire thing had been that broad. Yeah. If the entire universe was really broad.
Like that movie Soap Dish.
There's just another good one. What was that one with John Candy where he was a soap opera?
Delirious.
Yeah, he was a soap opera writer who like got knocked on the head and woke up in his own soap opera, and he realized that he could write on a typewriter, and
he could still write from within the soap opera and change reality.
Super weird.
I love that movie.
I haven't seen it in so long. I don't know if it holds up at all. God, we're probably the first people to talk about it in 15 years, but
it's been a while since I've seen it. I used to rent it a lot from my local VHS video store.
But yeah, like you could have, if you had made Overboard that broad, maybe you could have gotten away with it. But it's still kind of the real world in which this thing happens, and it's just, it can't sustain the weirdness of its own existence. And it doesn't address any of the elephants in the room, because if it did, it wouldn't be a flighty comedy. But because it's a flighty comedy, the entire premise falls apart.
Yeah.
It probably shouldn't exist. However, I'm really glad it introduced me to some of these supporting cast members.
Yeah.
Again, Mel Rodriguez, I think, is really, really, really funny, and I can't wait to see him in other things. I'm not terribly familiar with his other stuff. So, great. Cool.
I'm wondering if we're due for a remake of something like that has like a creepy premise that was made in the 80s or some bygone era, but it really does just address the darkness of the whole thing. Like would like a Todd Solondz style, just complete cynical film of despair remake of Overboard be in our future? I mean,
maybe,
we can't do Overboard now, but surely there's like
Todd Solondz's remake of What Women Want.
There you go.
Yeah,
remake What Women Want and really kind of address just the horrific. You need someone like Mary Harron.
Mary Harron would knock that out. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, there's a bunch of weird shit out there. We need to move past it. So this is like this weird. It's like this feels like such a relic. This really does. This feels like it should not have been made.
Like imagine Revenge of the Nerds, and they do like all those spy cameras in the sorority house, and they all go to prison because that is like the most horrible thing they could do.
That would be great, actually. I'd love to see that. Let's move on because I don't think we have that much more to say about it.
No, we really
it's not
don't.
funny enough to compensate for any of that. Tell me about what's the next biggest thing? Well, I'm going to tell you about Tully.
Yeah, Tully is a major-ish release. It's awards bait anyway.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of a weird double feature with Overboard because they're both about overwhelmed moms who end up getting a lot of help. This one stars Charlize Theron as a mother of 3. She's just had a new baby. The middle child has emotional problems, which they say in the movie are undiagnosed, but he appears to have perhaps some symptoms of autism or something similar. She's married to Mark Duplass, but he is working the whole time, and she's expected to just take care of the kids and the family. And she's completely overwhelmed. She's having anxiety attacks, and her brother. I'm sorry. Wait, Mark Duplass plays her brother.
Oh, okay.
My bad. Hang on a second. Let me.
Who plays the husband?
Who plays the husband? Because I totally spaced.
You said
Ron Livingston plays her husband.
Oh, okay.
Ron Livingston plays her husband. Mark Duplass.
I could see how you'd mix those guys out.
They play similar roles. Yeah. Ron Livingston plays her husband. Mark Duplass plays her brother. Mark Duplass is very successful, and he offers as a present to get her a night nanny. And a night nanny is a woman who comes to your house at night, watches the baby, lets you get some sleep. If the baby needs to nurse, they wake you up, and then they just let you go right back to sleep afterwards. Sounds nice.
Yeah. I mean, my son's not a baby anymore, but that would have been great.
The memories are fresh, aren't they? So it sounds like a good idea. And who knocks at her door but a young woman named Tully, played by Mackenzie Davis from *Halt and Catch Fire*. And over the course of the film, Marlowe, played by Charlize Theron, and Tully, played by Mackenzie Davis, they bond. Tully is so young and effervescent and worldly and basically a total hippie that she sort of opens Marlowe's eyes, and Marlowe realizes that the world is a better place and she has more things to be optimistic about, and maybe her life isn't a hideous montage of humiliation and shame. Tully cleans the house. Tully makes the nice cupcakes so Marlowe doesn't look bad at all the school functions. They go to bars together. This is really, 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 really great. And I do not want to tell you where it goes from there.
I was about to say, there's some big twist coming.
I do not want to tell you where it goes from there.
All right.
I do not, because on one hand, while you're watching
turns out they've been married this whole time.
That would have been a twist. No, because Tully is, in many respects, like, you can see the Chris Columbus, like, totally insufferable version of this.
Oh, golly, yes.
And that's not what this is. And I really admire, Jason Reitman is a really hit-or-miss director.
His hits are big hits, and his misses go way off the mark.
Whoa! Men, Women, and Children is just a huge misfire. Just hit another planet. Like, it's so wrong.
Did you see Labor Day?
I did not!
That lands on planet sexism. It's fantastic.
Great.
It's so bad.
So I didn't know what I was going to get here. It's written by Diabolik, a writer who I think has a lot of talent, but I don't like everything she does. Mm-hmm. And here what they've done is they've taken this very familiar setup. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. And they, first off, just from most of the movie, it's just so well acted. Charlize Theron is, of course, one of the most talented actors of her generation. Mackenzie Davis is one of the most talented actors of her generation, if you ask me, and I can't wait to see her do bigger and better things, and I'm looking forward to this being a launch pad for that. Jason Reitman also very admirably creates this environment of anxiety, of this overwhelming amount of expectation that is put on Charlize Theron's character. So that when Tully comes in, it is a relief, and it doesn't feel like, you know, sometimes you see these movies like, oh, I don't know how she does it, or something like that. And you're just like, she does it because she's rich, and she can afford nannies and stuff. And and like, that's how. And you just sort of kind of get mad at the movie a little bit, because it's just like, I know how she does that. Here, I totally buy into her entire struggle, and so I'm down for it. But ultimately, the movie doesn't make the point that, oh, everything is sunshine and roses. It actually makes a very profound, I think, observation about the importance of mental health. And not just your mental health, but the mental health of others, and what we need to do when we see other people suffering from the amount of exhaustion that Marlowe experiences. And I think that's actually a really flat-out poignant point to make. And I think what they do is they lull you in with this movie that feels really feel good, and then they kind of drop a hammer on you. And I really just think that it comes together so well. It's interesting because on one hand, you see a lot of that formula. Again, this could be a Chris Columbus movie, but it just has a more striking impact than that, and good for them. Honestly, like, this is the kind of genre that people do not like tend to respect very much, and it's really great to know that it can be done with so much deftness and so much understanding. You really get the impression that the people, you know, making the movie really wanted to make something special. They weren't making a genre motion picture, even though it hits some familiar genre beats. It took me a while, but once the movie finally sort of revealed itself and just said, here's really what we're getting at with all of this, and it's not about being cute, it's about being observant, and I'm like, good on you, Tully. Like, good on you. Like, seriously, like, well done, like, throughout. Like, I think there are critiques that could be made, but I think they're all in service of a really great message that is well conveyed by a smartly directed and incredibly well acted movie.
All right. I know Diabolik is a mother, and she probably went through something really similar, so it might be drawing from real life experience.
Perhaps. I mean, a lot of her movies are about motherhood. Juno is very clearly about motherhood. What was the Ricky and the Flash? Dealt with motherhood, about a mother who had a choice between her kids and her career, and she chose a career, and that career did not go well, but she still made that choice. And I actually think that's not a great movie, but I do think it's really well acted, and the really like soulful moments really hit very well.
It's a Jonathan Demme film, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like his last like narrative feature.
So weird.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It's just not his best work. So like, and then of course she did what's that horror movie she did?
Jennifer's Body.
Jennifer's Body is great. Jennifer's Body is so underappreciated. So it's
really, really wise, that movie.
Yeah, so I'm not a huge fan of everything Jason Reitman does or everything Diabolik does, but this is a hit.
Megan Fox is a good actress. Leave her alone.
Yeah.
I think she's quite good.
Yeah. So yes, Tully, I recommend seeing Tully. It's in some respects it's the better version of Overboard. Tell me about. Do you want to talk about next? Ghost Stories or Manhunt?
Let's go for Manhunt.
Okay.
Because this is in the recent orgy of acquisition that Netflix has been going through. They have scraped up John Woo's latest film.
Now, John Woo hasn't made a movie in a bit.
Well, he has. I think his last film... I forgot the title of his last film. His last two movies, however, were gigantic 4-hour-long period epics.
Oh, no, he did a couple of movies I don't think really got released over here. He did The Crossing and The Crossing 2.
Which was actually one gigantic film.
Oh, that's the one you're thinking about. I thought you were talking about Red Cliff.
Well, and Red Cliff, same deal.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Red Cliff was released as 2 parts. The Crossing was also released in 2 parts. So he made these two gigantic 4-hour Chinese period epics that didn't get huge releases in the States.
Red Cliff is great.
Red Cliff is
I didn't see
good.
The Crossing. Red Cliff is great.
And now he made a film that was sort of I think somebody must have approached him and said, "Hey, can you do like another John Woo film, like a John Woo type film?" Is like, sure, for old time's sake. So now he's gone back to the flying through the air, firing 2 guns, shouting mold of action that he kind of helped to pioneer back in the 90s.
If anyone isn't terribly familiar with John Woo because he hasn't had like a major American release in a while, and maybe you're newer, John Woo helped sort of reinvent the action genre in the late 80s and early 90s with a series of incredible quote-unquote gun-fu action movies, which had the most gorgeous, exciting, exhilarating, well-choreographed shootouts you've still ever seen in a movie.
The Killer and Hard Boiled.
That's the double feature.
Were the 2 big ones for a while.
And he did a lot of other good movies, but The Killer and Hard Boiled are the big ones. And then he came to America, he did a couple of hit movies, Broken Arrow, Face Off, and then the studio system kind of ate him up a bit.
Well, he also did like Hard Target and Mission Impossible 2, and then he did Wind Talkers, and that was kind of like...
And then Paycheck, and he made
Wind
a
Talkers
few
and
stinkers
Paycheck,
towards the end,
were not good movies. And actually, I haven't seen Wind Talkers. Just
it's not particular.
It looks so bad that I haven't been able to bring myself to see it.
Yeah, it's not a particularly good film.
I did see Paycheck, and Paycheck was a
terrible
stinker.
movie. Yeah, it's such a great short story too. It really pissed me off.
Yeah. And so he went back to China. He made some really big, gigantic Chinese epics, and now he's back doing sort of an action thing that he did back in 1992. And it's actually a remake of a Japanese film that helped inspire The Killer to begin with. It's the lead character from the 1976 film, which was when the original came out, has the same sunglasses and suit as as Chow Yun-Fat's character in The Killer. So he's just sort of going back and adapting the thing that he's always kind of wanted to. The plot is completely absurd. It's about a Chinese lawyer who is in Japan and becomes a man on the run, like in The Fugitive, almost immediately. He meets a femme fatale at a party. She says, "Meet me back at your place." He goes back to her place, and she's dead, and now he's on the run. And it turns out there's corrupt cops who let him go on the run, and so then there's a Javert-type Japanese cop who has an eager beaver young assistant, and these two are tracking him down, and eventually they meet up, and they respect each other, and now they have to uncover the larger conspiracy at hand, which involves in kidnapping homeless people and injecting them with like rage zombie drugs. And yes, there are scenes of like evil scientists in lab coats holding up gigantic syringes full of like glowing blue fluid as they creep really slowly towards somebody going, "No!" John Woo back in the 90s was considered kind of classy. Now, his films have always been aggressively violent. I think The Killer broke some sort of record for number of bullets fired on screen at the time.
I'm sure Hard Boiled immediately.
Yeah, and Hard Boiled, and I think it was like broken several times since. But yeah, it was, and people's heads explode and people die in slow motion, and yes, doves fly in slow motion in just about every single one of his movies. That's one of his visual trademarks.
It's a thing.
He makes fun of it in Manhunt. There's a car chase where somebody crashes into a crate and a bunch of doves fly out and they fly in slow motion. Good guy jumps on a bad guy and is about to shoot him when a dove flies in between them and blocks the shot. So the dove knocks the gun out of the guy's hand.
Oh, that's probably a Branded to Kill reference.
Maybe so.
Okay. That's fun.
Sure.
Branded to Kill, the guy's going to kill another guy, but a butterfly lands on his telescopic sight.
Oh, right. Yeah. I've forgotten about that.
Love Branded to Kill.
Branded to Kill. That's a Seijun Suzuki film. You need to watch Branded to Kill.
Branded to Kill is amazing.
But yeah, he's working in this sort of really old, almost like, I'm not sure how self-referential he feels he's trying to be here. If he's saying, this is really cheesy, I think it's silly, I'm going to put it in my silly movie. Or if he thinks this is really serious. It's really difficult to tell. However he feels about it, it's a cheesy-ass movie.
Okay. Is it a good one?
It feels retro in kind of a clunky way. It feels like it was made in 1992.
But is that a good thing?
It's on a base level, it's very, very entertaining. But it's kind of disappointing to have this from John Woo, who has been previously so balletic and kind of classy. He's clearly not bringing any of his sort of cosmopolitan panache to something like Manhunt. Mm-hmm. He's just having a ball. Do you remember when Greg Araki made that film Kaboom?
Yeah.
Like, Greg Araki was kind of moving away from his really, porny aesthetic, there's no real other way to put it. Mm-hmm. His films feel really porny, and he made a few kind of classy movies. He made films like White Burn to Blizzard and Mysterious Skin, things that are dealing with kind of more mature themes. When John Waters approached him at a film festival saying, "Hey, I like your new movies. Can you do an old Greg Araki movie again?" It's like, okay, fine, I'll do this film about a bunch of college students who just bone each other and there's an alien in it. Like, oh, well, yeah, that's Greg Araki. I thought we were past this, Greg Araki,
yeah.
But all right. I feel like John Woo's past this.
That's how I felt when Steven Spielberg did Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah, it's like he doesn't... You're
you
already
don't know how to make
You crossed a line with Schindler's List. You don't need to go back to the action anymore.
Well, you can go back to the action, but almost every time he's gone back to the action, there's two kinds of Steven Spielberg contemporary thrillers. There's ones that have a lot on their mind, and they're usually really great, like Minority Report or Munich. And then there's ones where he's trying to be light and silly, and they come across like playing Legos with your dad. Where it's just yeah, it's fun, and I'm glad my dad's hanging out with me, but yeah, that whole fridge thing doesn't work, Dad. I don't know I don't know what broke your imagination. Or oh yeah, no, just throw in every movie you like, Dad. Whatever. Ready Player One to you too. But you get the impression your dad.
Glass. Ready Player One to you.
You just get the impression he'd rather be doing something else. I haven't seen Manhunt. Which I actually didn't realize there was a new John Woo movie out until you told me you were reviewing this, and I'm like, oh crap!
Yeah,
I wish I had time to watch that before the podcast because I love John Woo.
Yeah,
he's hit or miss, but his hits are great.
Now,
and, yeah,
it also speaks to a larger issue that some people have addressed with how Netflix is kind of acquiring films. Netflix, if you count them as a major player in the film release mold, has released more film. Is going to release more films than I think all the other studios combined.
Yeah, most studios don't have a new release in theaters every single week. Netflix pretty much does right now.
Yeah. And
they're all, and because there's no difference, it's one thing if Universal releases a movie to theaters and they release, the Tremors sequel we're going to review this week, which goes to Netflix and to VOD and to DVD. There's a difference in tier. There's a premiere, top flight movie, and then there's a little genre thing. We sort of squeak that out. Netflix, with the occasional exception of a movie they go all out for advertising on, like Bright or the Cloverfield Paradox, every movie, regardless of whether it's good, bad, big, small, genre, not genre, great filmmaker, no-name filmmaker, they're just dumped on there.
Plopped on the table.
If you log into Netflix within a couple of days of when it comes out, they give you a big thing, and then a week later, it's buried. That's the real downside. A lot of people are like, it's great to have our films released on Netflix, everyone can get it. Fine, no one's going to find it because most people don't dig very deep. Yeah, especially on Netflix, which isn't organized well. I don't like the sort of random sneeze of features they kind of just throw at you. If you look it up on your laptop, there are ways to just sort of look at every movie that's out there in a particular genre. If you're doing it on your TV, you have to know what you're searching for. And that's a pain. That's not a good system. And there's no catalog that you can browse through in any sort of organized fashion. You can't look at the entirety of the Netflix catalog anywhere. Well, there are places that have it listed for that purpose, but Netflix doesn't do that. Somebody else is doing that for them, and Netflix needs to offer that service on their TVs immediately. You need to be able to thumb through every single title they have. You need to know what's on there. Yeah. I don't know why they are so coy about what they have, and that coyness has led to a kind of casualness of release that is, everybody says these things are so available, but you know what? If you're just going on to Netflix and you're consuming everything equally casually, films will feel less important, and you won't really necessarily understand their context, and you're going to be checking your Twitter throughout
throughout every single film you're watching on Netflix.
Well, to get to your point,
there have been a lot of like think pieces, especially you know when with Netflix being rejected from Cannes. You know, there's this whole debate now as to what counts as a proper release. Like proper in quotation marks.
I think the whole can thing I think is a separate issue. Real fast to get to an earlier point you made. You know, why don't they offer like just a long list of all of everything they have? It's because most of what they have isn't top flight stuff.
It doesn't matter. I want to see it all.
My point is that when you only log into your PS4 or your Roku or whatever, and it just says, here are what's being watched right now, and here are your top recommendations. They're not showing you the like 300 other movies they have in that genre, which are straight to video, you know, nothing movies. Some of which are good, don't get me wrong, but most of which aren't, and it doesn't make them look good. They're showing you the stuff that makes them look good.
Yeah. As
for the Cannes thing, if you're not familiar with this, the Cannes Film Festival said that Netflix movies weren't allowed to play in contention because they weren't being theatrically released, I think specifically in France.
Yeah.
But regardless, most Netflix movies don't get theatrical releases because Netflix doesn't feel the need, and they don't have to, and they can do that. That's fine. But it raised the question, Cannes is being snooty. And on one hand, yes. They're a snooty film festival, are now and always have been.
Let them be snooty. Well, that's their job.
But the real issue here was like, but they're all real movies. And I'm like, yes, that's actually true. And it's one of the reasons why on this podcast we review theatrical releases, straight-to-video releases, TV movies sometimes. A movie is a movie. I think we can all agree on that, regardless of where it is distributed. Where it is distributed is only really significant to the distributors, or if you're submitting it for something, like an awards body. That's it. That's the only reason that ever matters is it eligible for an Oscar or is it eligible for an Emmy? And honestly, that shouldn't matter to you much. There's no reason for it to matter. The movie is still the movie.
It shouldn't, and it should. I think I kind of disagree with you on this point, because we're at a point where the film consumption technology is changed to the point where it's indistinguishable from television. People can go on Netflix and watch whatever film they like. And there is now no difference between a television show that runs 90 minutes and a feature film. And whereas
you mean a TV movie, for example, or like
a TV movie or a pilot to another series, a 2-part episode, those are essentially the same as feature films now. And we are at a point as film critics when we have to start thinking about where the line is between TV and cinema, if there should be one, where it should be drawn if there is, and what the future of the form is. Because if it's TV or cinema, or if they're indistinguishable, then we should just stop distinguishing.
Well,
but if that's the case, why are some films going to be released in public venues like an actual cinema building where you have to leave the house and pay money, and why are some not?
Well, I don't think that's necessarily our decision to make. They can decide how to do that themselves.
Well, but maybe we should start thinking about this, and we should have a discussion about this, and we should be able to at least have in our minds where that line is.
Well, for me, the line between movie and television, for me, at least in terms of, not just in terms of how it was distributed, but where's the line in the art form, is serialized or not.
There you go.
That's it. For me, that's it. That's the only line. If it's it's an HBO made-for-TV movie, that's still a movie. That's not TV. For me, TV is serialized. Now, that could be 9 parts released all at once on Netflix, and there are individual chapters, and they're designed that way. Or that could be weekly programming on CBS or Fox or whatever. But as long as it's serialized, I feel like that is a substantially different medium than done in one chunk. They're expected to maintain your attention the entire time. That is a movie. That is a film to me. A feature film.
The monkey wrench in that mold, however, are the Marvel films. This is a serial writ large.
Sure.
These are gigantic chapters in one enormous narrative, and I think that's what a lot of people are being drawn to. They like that it's essentially like hyper TV.
Yes.
That you see in movie theaters. And
that's fair. I think there are also
Does that count as cinema?
Okay, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna. Here's my take on that.
Okay.
I think anytime you lay out sort of a rules as to what a particular medium is or what a particular genre is, you're going to run into movies, TV shows, whatever that blur the lines.
Uh-huh.
You know, that do more than one thing, and I think that's just natural, and we need to accept that can be more than one thing. However, I think in the case of the Marvel movies, and pretty much any serialized franchise, like the Fast and Furious movies or James Bond or whatever, those are also designed to be, for the most part, a couple of exceptions here and there, they're mostly designed to be absorbed individually as well. Like, you can enjoy the first Ant-Man without knowing everything that's going on in the Marvel Universe. Infinity War, probably not so much. It'd probably be a really weird experience to watch that movie without seeing any of the other Marvel movies. But the majority of them, you can just sort of flit in and out, and there might be a few things you don't get, but whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that one, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, and I think in the end, everyone pretty much
succeeding. Yeah.
I think everyone ends up with cake in that particular scenario.
As of this recording, Avengers Infinity War just crossed the $1 billion mark in terms of its earnings.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Nope.
Yep. And it's pretty good. I liked it. But, like, yeah.
It's pretty good.
But that's my thing, is I don't think that's television just because there are multiple chapters in it. I think that's just a series of movies.
Or something like Harry Potter, which really are part of one, especially after once you've crossed like the third one, it all becomes like one gigantic arc rather than individual chapters anymore.
And by the fifth one, they don't bother like
recapping anything.
Yeah, by the fifth one, that's just serialized. So
and they become worse films as a result, but maybe better miniseries.
Maybe
I haven't watched them back to back to back to back, so we'll see.
Maybe
if I ever do that.
I'm owed for a rewatch on Harry Potter, and we should put that up as a poll choice at some point.
You need to turn your phone off now.
Oh my god, Siri
that was you this time.
Siri just thought I was asking it about Harry Potter.
Siri, stop advertising to us.
Stop it.
We're having our own conversation.
Meh.
Siri, shut up. Shut up, Siri. Bad artificial intelligence.
We got off on a tangent real fast. Wrap up Wanted. Is Wanted any good?
It's enjoyable, but it's shallow to a disappointing degree.
Okay. I'm going to tell you about Bad Samaritan.
Tell me about Bad Samaritan.
Bad Samaritan is the latest film from Dean Devlin, the director of Geostorm.
My favorite car from the 90s.
I'm going to, real fast. If you don't remember Geostorm came out last year, was a super expensive, all-star, giant disaster epic.
That flopped like crazy.
That no one talks about already. And let me tell you something. It's really fun. It's bad.
It's really watchable.
It's really bad, but it's fun. I enjoyed it.
It was one of my first reviews for IGN, and I was kind of embarrassed. Like, this one's awful. See it.
Yeah, it's really entertaining. So I was actually kind of looking forward to a new film from Dean Devlin. I thought, hey, maybe this guy is like this really fun, cheesy filmmaker. We're going to get a bunch of weird stuff from him. And then his next movie, after this giant movie about space satellites controlling the weather and going haywire and turning the Earth into a bomb, and I was like...
And the only person who can save the day is Gerard Butler with an American accent, question mark.
Gerard Butler and Jim Sturgis, both playing American brothers. What?
Neither of them can play Americans.
Why bother at that point? I don't know.
Just have them both be Scottish.
I digress. His new film is a tiny little thriller.
Oh, boy.
And it's got a good setup. I'm going to say this right now. Whatever else I say about the movie, setup is fine. Setup is so fine. You've seen it already. In better movies. It stars...
It's David Tennant, isn't it?
David Tennant plays the bad guy in it.
Ooh, okay. I like David Tennant.
I like David Tennant, too. David Tennant was, of course, arguably the greatest Doctor Who ever. But... Say what you will.
You just got an angry note. Somebody says, he's not Doctor Who, he's the Doctor. The name is not Doctor Who.
And in more recent episodes of Doctor Who, they play with that and they make it okay. So
okay.
There you go. It stars Robert Sheehan.
Okay.
Or Sheehan. I apologize if I'm pronouncing it wrong. He is a photographer. He's an amateur photographer, but his real gig is he's a valet. And when a snooty jerk person gives them their car, he and his best friend drive their car back to that person's house. Everyone has those like little, home navigation units.
Oh, yeah.
And rob them.
Okay.
And they rob them of little things so that they won't notice right away that something's missing. Otherwise, obviously, the scam wouldn't work. So, take a piece of jewelry or go through their mail and find that they've got a new credit card just arrived. They just take that one piece of mail.
Heck, that just sounds like a good racket.
It's actually a good idea. So what happens is he breaks into David Tennant's house, and David Tennant's house is this, giant mansion, and it's full of creepy horse pictures, and then he goes into his office.
Horse pictures.
Robert Sheen goes into his office, and there he finds that the room
hostage.
is... Yeah.
Oh, nice. I guessed it. Okay.
Yeah. Like the room is covered in plastic, and there's a woman chained up in the corner,
okay.
And he's like, oh, crap. What do I do? I need to save her, but I will also go to jail if I get involved.
Because I'm a thief, yeah.
And there's a moral quandary there. And I'm like, okay, all right. But to his credit, he does want to help, but he's also panicking and doesn't make a lot of good decisions. And also, in a couple of minutes, David Tennant's going to want his car back.
Right.
So he's down to the wire. He ends up having to leave, and then it's just him trying to figure out.
I would love to
do.
see the stalling scene, like his friend is back at the valet. It turns out we put it in for a car wash.
Yeah,
and,
they have that scene. They have that scene. The guy's stalling as long as he can until the dude comes back.
It becomes this cute little sitcom moment.
Yeah, and you know what? That whole opening bit, that's fine. Good setup. You might remember it from such films as Don't Breathe. Or Beneath the Darkness, a film with Dennis Quaid that nobody saw for a reason. But
I think that was like in 8 different episodes of Dexter.
Yeah, like just the idea of you break into someone's house and they're doing something infinitely worse than breaking into someone's house, and now you have a moral quandary. You are more moral than this person, but only because that person is terrible. You might be willing to steal, but you're not willing to condone murder or kidnapping, and so you're in a bind.
Yeah.
And what's worse, the police would never believe you because you're a thief.
Right.
Okay, that's actually a good setup.
Or you just get busted, and even if you're doing the right thing, you'd still get busted, and you don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, that's a good setup. Movie doesn't know what to do with that, and it's a real shame, because like after he leaves the house, and like after that night ends, the momentum just dies. Like he tries early on to just tell the cops, like, screw it, I don't care if I go to jail, I can't live with this on my conscience, and the cops don't believe him, and that just doesn't go anywhere. And then David Tennant finds out that this guy broke into his house, and David Tennant starts trolling him on the internet. Like he gets his Facebook password and starts messing with his girlfriend. It's like, I'm breaking up with you, and you're just sort of like, we know you're a serial killer. This is usually in a movie you ramp up the tension. You don't scale it way down.
You know what? If you're writing a thriller, Hollywood screenwriters, and you're using Facebook as a plot point, don't. Just stay away.
No one's made
Unfriend that dead bitch.
Is a line from the movie Unfriended, which is not a good movie.
It is quite stupid.
Is it Unfriended? No, that's Friend Request.
Oh, excuse me, Friend. You're right.
Unfriended is the one that takes place all over Skype, which is not.
I haven't seen Unfriended. I did see Friend Request.
I saw an early
really
cut of
stupid.
Unfriended, which was pretty good, and then it's my understanding that they changed the ending to a worse ending. Oh, geez, which is frustrating. So I don't know how it totally plays now, but the ending I saw made it okay. But yeah, it's hard to do a social media thriller, and it's only one part of this movie, but by the time they get to it, you're just sort of mildly embarrassed for the film. Like, Hitchcock would have done amazing things with this. And people like Fede Alvarez did Don't Breathe, which had another hook on top of it, but that's another story about criminals break into someone's house. That person ends up being more dangerous than they are, and they're trapped there. But what that movie has is the immediacy of it. And the immediacy is where this premise lives. You're in the house. They're there with you. You're sneaking around. Once it becomes a game of cat and mouse, you realize that the cat and the mouse are both kind of dumb. And it doesn't work at all. There's a couple of good bits, like if you really like thrillers, and this might be a fun Netflix someday, like where it's just like on. There's a couple of really good shock scares that Dean Devlin comes out of nowhere with, and they're really creepy. Like 2 or 3. And Carrie Condon plays the kidnapping victim. And she has... I like her a lot.
Carrie Condon, yeah.
She has a line at the end of this movie, which I'm going to say right now, going to be one of the best lines of dialogue of the year. They totally earned this one great line of dialogue. And I will let them have that. It's not worth watching the whole movie to get to, but if you do, you know there's something good coming right towards the end.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a misfire. It's one of those movies that you're kind of surprised didn't end up going straight to Netflix. Like, this is the kind of movie that like studios are kind of getting rid of, or it's just like, oh yeah, we spent $10 million on that.
Well, I think this is why Netflix is just scraping all this stuff up. Studios are so willing to unload.
Yeah.
And Netflix says, fine. We'll show those. We'll get the advertising dollars.
And sending something straight to DVD has no prestige. Netflix, for now, until they do an entire year where they release a bunch of movies where...
That's this year.
Seriously, Netflix, you have this prestige right now. You have all these prestige television shows and a couple of Oscar-nominated movies out there. But if
Oscar-winning movies.
Oscar-winning movies now, if every movie you release, for the most part, throughout a year, and you release one a week, is really average genre stuff, you're going to lose all that prestige, and it's going to mean nothing anymore. So that's a potential danger here. But this one didn't go to Netflix. It went to theaters, and you're going to sit in there in theater, and you just go,
I wish I was watching this on Netflix.
I didn't have to leave the house to see something like this. So, yeah.
You know what? I would like to advocate going to the theater. Speaking of the line between Netflix and cinema, seeing a film in theaters is always simply a better experience.
Well, it depends on your theater. That's the other problem. Some theaters
I suppose so. I think even a crappy theatrical experience is superior to a great home one. Even if you have one of those home theaters and you got speakers hanging from your walls and you got a big TV, I would rather see something on a small, stained screen with creaky seats and somebody noisy next to me than do what you do at home.
Well, that's one take.
That's what I do.
Tell me about Ghost Stories.
Ghost Stories is a British anthology-ish horror movie that got a limited release in certain indie theaters around LA.
And actually, we're a little late on this one. Apparently, it came out a week.
It came out a week ago,
Yeah.
so I think it moved to an even smaller indie house at this point. Its bigger indie release is already over, but I saw it, so I'd like to tell you about it. It is about an investigator who has his own TV show where he debunks psychics. He's a psychic debunker.
Okay.
He has modeled his career off of an earlier generation of debunkers, who's very much like the Amazing Randy. If you're familiar with the Amazing Randy, he famously debunked psychics and confronted psychics, and was very, very skeptical. They're just not magicians in this version,
right?
And he spends in the opening scene. He debunks a psychic on stage, and kind of ruins his career, and thinks that he's doing good for the sake of the truth. He wants to get the truth out there because that's more important to him than these sort of comforting lies. He gets a letter from his idol, who's been living out in a trailer. He's been missing for 30 years. He goes out to the trailer and he says, I've been following your career. What you're doing is terrible, and I can prove it to you. Here are 3 case files that I was never able to solve. And we get flashbacks for each one of those case files as to what happened.
I'm going to tell you right now, that for an anthology series, that's a pretty good framing device.
It's a pretty good framing device. However, I wish it were more anthology-driven, because that entire intro takes up about the first 30 minutes of the movie.
Oh, no. That's not
it's like setting up the plot. No, you need to start with him arriving at the trailer, and the guy's in there saying, you're doing terrible I know who you are. We don't need to see this guy's backstory.
Barring the credits, if you're doing an anthology movie, you have 8 minutes to get to the first story, and that's a maximum.
Tops. Yeah, 8 minutes tops.
Yeah.
So yeah, he starts investigating. So we see him going to each of those case files and interviewing them, and then we get the flashback where we see what happened, and we see the person encountering a ghost in some way. Now, because this is all stories and it's all hearsay, of course this guy's not convinced. He doesn't have any sort of hard evidence, and he goes back to and anyway he investigates these 3 stories, and it's clearly taking a lot of filmmaking cues from the Larry Fessenden school of horror filmmaking. Larry Fessenden is a horror filmmaker. He did films like The Wendigo.
I love The Wendigo. The Wendigo's great.
And he has made a wonderful career out of making horror out of as little as possible. Not just low budgets, but he is a firm believer that a monster is scarier the less you see of it, and it's especially scary if you never see it. So yeah, this is a film where
he's produced a lot of stuff.
And he really promotes independent horror in a lot of ways. He also does a really terrific radio program called Tales from Beyond the Pale that you should probably seek out. But yeah, so we see these sort of flashback ghost stories. They're all filmed in inky blackness. You can hardly see anything. And I think that's actually to the film's credit. It's not that they're just covering things up. It's just to sort of emphasize the darkness in these stories. A lot of films, when they shoot at night, especially if you look at some of the Blumhouse stuff, it's just blue filters or weird moonbeams coming in from who knows where, and you can actually see everything. Yeah. It's like an expressionistic version of darkness. So it's nice when you see a horror film that actually takes place in real darkness. Mm-hmm. Your eye is searching for something, and when you see a flash, even if it's of a split second of some ghostly creature, it's a lot more effective. Each one of the 3 stories. One is about a night watchman in an abandoned asylum. That old hacksaw. One is about a young man who hits something on the road in the dark in the woods on the way home.
Okay.
And in a really, really terrific scene, I just have to describe this scene for you. So it's the one scare I'm going to kind of give away. He hits this thing, he drives away, he gets out of the car, he looks at it, and it's clearly not anything he recognizes. Mm-hmm. He gets back in the car, he's in a panic, he drives away, and of course the car stalls, he's stuck. And then something's on the roof of the car. And then it kind of like scratches at the door, it's all really scary. And we only see a close-up of his face through this, but we hear the car door open. And he's too afraid to turn around, and then we hear it close. And then we hear, "Hey." And he bolts. And it's great.
That sounds really scary.
That little bit is great. And of course, there's other things going on in the woods, and I won't say what's going on. And the third one, the subject is Martin Freeman, the only one kind of really recognizable actor from all of this, who tells a story about how his wife was really ill. They were trying to have a child. She went to give birth too early, and ghosts ensue. Mm-hmm. Then when we finally have a conclusion of these stories, there's yet another story that kind of wraps up the bookend material in this mind-blowing meta way that we couldn't possibly have seen coming.
Okay, see, that's my thing with anthology movies. There's 2 questions I have whenever you do a horror anthology. One, what's the ratio? When you look at the actual installments, are they mostly good? Are they mostly bad? Are they all good? Yeah. That's really rare. Usually there's at least one stinker. But I want to know the ratio, and I want to know, is the framing device good, and does it have a good payoff?
Good button at the end.
Yeah, and it don't need to be a great payoff. You can even see the payoff coming a mile away, like the original Tales from the Crypt movie. It's pretty obvious what's really going on, but it's still it feels like a movie. And then sometimes you watch one like my wife Michelle and I, we just watched The House That Dripped Blood, starring Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee and Denholm Elliott and John Pertwee from Doctor Who, and that is not a good horror anthology. There's a couple of fun bits in it, but it's basically just like, oh, let me tell you about all the people who died in this house, and it's just like there's nothing connecting them except the house, and it's not like they're all about a creepy house. They're like, one of them was about a guy who lives in that house, but then he goes off to a wax museum and dies. Like, it has nothing to do with the house. And at the end, they're just like, haha, don't you get it? The house was a thingy. And I'm like, no, it was not.
Doesn't make any sense.
You had some unrelated stories, and you just threw something together. I want it to feel like a movie.
It feels a little contrived, and it of course plays into the fact that these people are trying to debunk ghosts and their relationship with the supernatural. And that pays off in a satisfying way. The shorts are fine, but it does feel a little disjointed, and it feels a little too casual. Like I said, if it takes that long to get to the anthology series, we're not doing anything kind of zippy, and I think with anthology movies, it needs to feel a little exploitative. I think that's kind of a good way to function through that format. And this is really trying to take it a little too serious. Like the bookend material is a little too serious and ends up kind of overwhelming the individual chapters. It's kind of an okay story, but at the end of the day, it's not as good as you might have heard. Well, that's if you heard of it at all.
Okay, and let's talk about the last movie on our docket. And again, a lot of new releases this week, isn't there? Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell. Tremors is one of the longest consistently running horror franchises.
Consistently entertaining horror franchises.
Well, I'm going to get to that. But like when you think about most horror franchises that were popular enough to be an ongoing horror franchise have been rebooted by now.
That's true.
Like we're talking here, Tremors and Child's Play and Hellraiser are like the only ones which have not been rebooted. They just keep going, and they haven't stopped. And there's one every few years, and to some extent, there's a certain degree of consistency. Unfortunately, in Hellraiser, they're consistently bad and have been for like the last 7 films.
Yeah, since part 5, they're up to 10 now.
Yeah, it's been a while. But they're still going, and you know what you're going to get when you're going to get to them. So the Child's Play movies, still pretty good. Hellraiser movies, and
still pretty bad.
And Tremors, which is maybe the most consistent horror franchise. Like, it's between this and Final Destination, where they're all pretty darn good.
Oh.
They're all quite good, actually.
And I think in this new one, which is the 6th in the series, they understand what makes this series work. You watch the original Tremors, first of all, it holds up tremendously.
It's a very well-written, filmed movie. The characters are super great. The premise is super original. It is about a small desert town.
Perfection, Nevada.
Which is besieged by these Precambrian life forms, these ancient paleontological...
20-ton, subterranean worms.
Yeah, and they burrow through the earth at really fast speeds, but they're blind, and they only hear you if you make noise. Like, if you're running on the ground, they can hear your footsteps, but if you stop, they can't see you. So there's a whole bunch of really exciting sequences where everyone's got to be super quiet, and then one thing happens, and then a giant worm bursts through the earth and swallows you whole, and it's really cool.
It's really cool. And the design on the creatures is really great, but what really sells you could have that and just have it be a crappy monster movie and that's it.
Yeah.
But what really sells it is all of the characters. They're all a little bit eccentric, even our leads. So we have, Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward. They're kind of these two guys who are trying to escape this small town, but they're also kind of Lotharios, and they're not too bright, but we like them anyway.
They're dreamers, but they don't have a good dream. Like, they're not like, oh, we're going to get this great business off the ground. You don't know shit.
Yeah,
you're going to stay here your whole life because you don't actually have any skills or talents, but you're nice and we like you. So that's fine.
All of the people who run all these tiny local businesses, they all know each other. They have believable relationships. And of course, the cherry on the cake is Burt Gummer, played by Michael Gross.
And his wife
played by Reba McEntire, who is Reba. Oh, is it Reba?
I think it's Reba.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Country singer Reba McEntire, who I think was making her acting debut. They played these
survivalists.
Yeah, they played survivalists. This was made in 1990, so the Cold War was still going on, and they were getting ready for the big war with the communists. So they have this giant den full of weapons, and they're just and the thing is that they would be like the villains in a lot of other movies. Here they're seen as charming eccentrics, and they're very nice people,
and they help out.
Yeah,
they know how to deal with some of this stuff.
And yeah, they're occasionally a punchline, but let me tell you something. When giant worms attack your town, you want them there. And they're really useful.
And there were no theatrical sequels. All the rest of these were all straight to video. Fred Ward came back, but Kevin Bacon didn't for Tremors 2, which kind of ripped off Jurassic Park because they turned the Tremors into velociraptors, essentially.
And hang on, you just called them Tremors.
The graboids.
Yeah, they're not called Tremors.
They're not called Tremors. That was a mistake.
They're called graboids. A lot of people do that.
Yeah.
You got me on Doctor Who. I'm going to get you on graboids.
Fair.
Okay. But yeah, so, and over the course of a couple of sequels, we found out that the graboids, as they come to be called, have a series of evolutions. One in which they actually they burst open, and then little tiny ones burst out, and they run at you, and they see an infrared. And then there's another one called the Ass Blaster, which actually has propulsive butt powers that allow it to fly.
It can ignite its own farts, and that propels it into the air, and it soars around.
Tongue firmly in cheek throughout the entire series.
But good design on those monsters.
Very fun.
Yeah, they're actually kind of scary monsters.
And after the second one, after Fred Ward leaves, the protagonist of the series becomes Burt Gummer, again played by Michael Gross from, was it Family Ties?
Family Ties.
He was on Family Ties. He was in Steven Spielberg's Duel. And this became his franchise, and he's basically this lovable survivalist conspiracy theory nut who becomes a great hero.
Yeah, like you said, he'd be the villain in a lesser film. But this series, and Michael Gross especially, know exactly how to play this guy to make him a character we love and also laugh at.
Yeah.
We laugh at his extreme views, but we kind of love how devoted and actually kind of how good-hearted he is at the end of the day.
Yeah, he doesn't actually wish anyone ill. He sees himself as the hero.
And we believe it.
And he will behave heroically, but he just sees a lot of other things as the villain, and they're not necessary.
Yeah, he sees conspiracies everywhere. He's kind of a kook.
Yeah, and so it's really, really fun. And yeah, all the movies are quite good. The first one's the best. I think that's safe to say. Second one is okay, and then it gets really good when Michael Gross shows up about halfway through. The third one, when they go back to perfection, is actually pretty clever, and I like that they bring back most of the original cast, and I like it fine. The fourth one is a prequel showing how the town of Perfection was founded, and that one's not great, but you get to see an ancestor of Michael Gross who is an entirely different character, and he gets to, like, just sort of spread his wings a little bit, and it's really cute. The fifth one introduced Jamie Kennedy, as he was producing a reality series that Burt Gummer had started making about his survivalist skills and about fighting graboids. And we find out that Jamie Kennedy was also Burt Gummer's long-lost son, which was a bit of a stretch, but let me tell you something.
Whatever.
Jamie Kennedy's about the right kind of person. Like, he's about the right kind of celebrity to enter the Tremors franchise. Like, if you want to get, like, a recognizable actor...
But you don't want to stoop as low as Coolio.
Yeah. Like, Jamie Kennedy's got the right tone for this. Like, you get the impression that, like, Randy from Scream would have acted in one of these movies if he had lived. Like, it's one of those. So, like, he's actually okay.
Spoilers on Scream 2, dude.
What's it, like 15, 20 years old now? Shut up. That said... they started, like, you know, getting some bigger visual effects, actually, in the last couple. They started really throwing some CGI at it. The monsters looked pretty cool still. And now in the new one, the big gimmick is the graboids are in Canada, where it's cold.
I have a feeling in the script it was snowy, but they didn't have access. Like, they had to shoot during the off season, so it wasn't snowy when they were shooting.
Yeah, the beginning of the movie is a bunch of people and they're doing, like, geological studies underneath ice. And so, like, there's one scene where graboids are in the ice and they kill everyone. And I was like, oh, this is going to be an interesting sort of visual distinction. We're going to do something very, very new. And then the rest of the movie is them, like, in trailers, like on the edge of Eaton Canyon. Like, it's just, like, on the edge of the woods, and honestly, like, it doesn't even look that cold. Like, no one's got, like, chilliness on their breath. And they try to write that off
like a warm autumn day.
They try to write that off as global warming, but you just know that it was just too much of a pain in the ass to shoot in the snow.
They clearly had to rewrite the script when they couldn't get access. Like, it's like, there's supposed to be snow here. I know, what do we do? And it's like, well, here's an extra line of dialogue that explains.
So there kind of isn't actually much of a point to this one. It's basically Burt Gummer is called into action to fight more graboids. They do.
It's straightforward, and it works.
It's okay.
And the new cast of characters is, I would argue, just as lovable as the cast in the original.
Oh.
They're
up
because they're all a little bit odd, and I like that.
Okay. I like
this kind of little nutty guy named Swackhammer who's, like, seems a little on edge, and that kind of makes him funny. There's a really frank talking Canadian pilot who seems way too casual for her own good, and she's great.
I like her too. We meet the daughter of Kevin Bacon from the original Tremors. I would argue that the original Tremors gave its cast more to do, and as a result, the cast was a bit more likable and overall. That said, this is a good cast. For me, it boils down to this really does feel more repetitious than a lot of the other Tremors movies. A lot of the other Tremors movies, like, they would send him to... the last one sent Burt Gummer to Africa, if memory serves.
Yeah.
And
great scene with him with a cage and a lion. That was pretty great.
There's some cool stuff in that one. Again, the fourth one was a prequel. The third one, but the third one, they were still evolving the graboids. They became different monsters, so there was always a new gimmick here. Here, the big thing we find out is that Burt actually, there was a scene in Tremors 3
where he got swallowed.
He got swallowed by a graboid, and it turns out they left a parasite in him, and now he's dying. And I'm like, oh, okay, this actually could have been, like, really kind of great and intense, like a good, like, farewell to the character or whatever. And it's okay.
Yeah, well,
but mostly it's just an excuse to fight graboids. That said, I'll take any excuse to fight graboids.
Now, the only twist is now they have to catch one, which they've never done before.
Well, they have actually. They did it in 3.
Oh yeah, I guess they did, didn't they?
Never mind. Then I was literally watching this. And I'm just like, you caught one. It was a plot point. It's the thing that keeps perfection from ever being sold because it's an endangered species. Why are we doing this? I don't get it. And maybe it was dealt with on the short-lived TV series on the Sci-Fi Channel from like 15 years ago. I don't know. But I think probably what they could have done more clearly, it would have been nice if someone said, well, we have one. There's one in captivity. And then they just say, yeah, we don't have time to fly him down there. The only way we're going to save his life is if we get one here.
Or holy crap, it got out. Didn't you hear?
Something. Yeah. It would have been nice if they'd proved that they'd seen the other movies in the series. But that's not a big deal.
The real star is, of course, Michael Gross, who
Yes.
who is so comfortable in this character that he can just get up out of bed and start playing Burt Gummer.
Yeah.
I got to interview Michael Gross when the 5th one came out.
Yes, that was a good interview.
And I mean, he's a charming dude. He's a really talented guy, and he's really open about the role of Burt Gummer in his life. Mm-hmm. And he knows exactly who this guy is. He knows how he's going to evolve. He has it in his mind. And he loves the part. We love the part. We like seeing Burt Gummer do his shtick. So it doesn't really matter to me that it's repetitious. It's just an efficient monster movie at the end of the day. But it's got Burt Gummer in it. And I like Burt Gummer a lot.
It's probably my least favorite Tremors movie, but it's still a pretty good Tremors movie. And I'm ultimately recommending it, especially the fans of the series. There's a lot of people who got really excited because they shot a pilot for a new Tremors television series, which would have ignored all the sequels and would have brought Kevin Bacon back as the star. And a part of that really pissed me off. Not because they can't do that. Of course, they can do whatever the hell they want. They can reboot Tremors from scratch, and that's their right. And maybe it'll be good. I don't know. Maybe the pilot was good. I don't know. It didn't get picked up. But whatever. What ticked me off is that it really brought all the attention away from this really solid straight-to-video horror franchise that never got enough respect, but was popular enough to keep going all these years. This franchise has been going for almost 30 years. With one franchise and one star. Good for them. That's really, really great. And if you're mad that, like, the Kevin Bacon pilot didn't get off the ground, make sure you've actually seen the other Tremors movies, because it's not like they dipped in quality and it all sucked and the only person who could have saved it was Kevin Bacon. Michael Gross and the people behind Tremors, like the original creative team, was with the franchise for the first 4 movies. They kept it going, and it's a very respectable series, and I'm actually a big fan. And so this one wasn't my favorite, but it's good, and I like it.
Even if you don't know Tremors, but you do like monster movies.
Sergio!
The cat is getting into the kitchen again. Even if you don't like, you're not familiar with Tremors, but you do like monster movies, I think you can tune into this one on Netflix. It's on Netflix.
Yeah.
And just sort of jibe on its high energy, its good sense of humor, its brightness and its briskness, the creativity of the monsters, which are still interesting, and all of the kind of low budget but still watchable action that they're able to fold into all of this thing.
As low budget DVD movies go, this is a good one.
Yeah, it's about as good as this sort of thing gets, and I'm going to recommend it on that basis.
All right, so on the critically acclaimed scale, C- being the worst, C+ being the best, and C being where does Tremors: A Cold Day in Hell fall?
It's a C. I mean, it could never be a C+.
It's a C. It's a C+ if you like Tremors movies. If you're already a fan of the franchise, don't miss it. It's good. It's not my favorite, but it's good. What about Ghost Stories?
Ghost Stories also a C. There's a lot of fascinating stuff in it, but it's kind of limp, unfortunately.
Bad Samaritan is unfortunately a C-. I think there's some good pulpy ideas in there. It just doesn't have very good execution. Manhunt.
C. Great action. Period.
Okay.
That's it. That's all I can really say. Great action. Not much else.
Tully is a C+. It is a really excellent motion picture, and I highly recommend it. I think you're gonna kind of think you see where it's going, but even if you do, sit with it because it doesn't go there the way you expect. I'm a really big fan. And then Overboard.
C-. It's just not really enjoyable film.
It's kudos to the members of the cast who make it work as well as it does, but this was... I don't know if anyone can even make this movie work.
It's going to be forgotten in 2 months. No one will... in 2 months' time, somebody's going to say they remade Overboard?
It's probably true.
Yeah.
Probably true. All right, let's talk about... let's make our segue to our big double feature. Now, again, this week, your options were a whole bunch of big, notorious box office duds. Blockbuster season is starting for the summer, so we thought we'd kick it off wrong. And I don't remember what it was. We had Cutthroat Island was on there. Ishtar was on there.
Yeah.
But the film you chose was a little film called Hudson Hawk. Now, tell me what you remember about Hudson Hawk when it came out.
Well, Hudson Hawk came out in 1991, and I was already, paying attention to movies at that point. I was in, 91. I guess I was in junior high school at that point. And I remember really, really liking it. I didn't see it in theaters. No one did.
I did.
You did?
I saw it in theaters.
You were the one.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a huge bomb. I think like critics kind of panned it. Nobody really knew what to make of it at the time. And I ended up renting it from my local video store several times and watching it with friends. And we all really enjoyed it. We had heard it was a bomb. Mm-hmm. We're of the age where that doesn't matter. We don't really care. We can just see the movie and enjoy it. And it has a frantic, like Betty Boop cartoon sensibility to it that we all really glommed onto, and we all really loved it. And then, of course, we moved on to other things and hadn't seen it for many years. And I was afraid to go back, frankly, because I enjoyed it so much when I was, 13 years old. And I went back. I guess that's what I remember about it. That just, it kind of was an enjoyable sort of curio that my friends and I shared, despite its reputation as being really terrible.
When this movie came out in 1991...
Mm-hmm. It was 91.
It was 91. Bruce Willis was a huge star.
Mm-hmm.
This is real. I mean, people still know Bruce Willis, and he's still a star. He was a major box office draw. Die Hard was one of the biggest movies in years. I think Die Hard 2 had just come out as well.
Die Hard kind of launched him as an action hero.
Yeah, he was a big comedy star, especially on TV. But yeah, Die Hard made him a big action star. And if memory serves, Hudson Hawk was mostly sold as an action movie. And I think therein lies the tragedy of Hudson Hawk. Well, therein lies one of the tragedies of Hudson Hawk, because it's a film that was kind of apparently a behind-the-scenes mess, where it was a passion project for Bruce Willis. He has a co-story credit. It was what the movie was and what it should become were ideas that changed dramatically throughout the whole production.
It was sold as a gigantic blockbuster. There are like video game tie-ins to this thing. Like it was it was supposed to take the world by storm.
And it did not. It ended up costing $65 million, which might not seem like a lot today, but in 1991, that was a lot of money, especially for like a heist movie. And it only made $17.2 million. Now that's pretty bad. But let me tell you how bad this is. I remember being in the car with my parents driving me home from school in the late 90s. I want to say it was 98 or 99. Like 8 years after Hudson Hawk came out. When there was a story on the news about how, thanks to video rentals, Hudson Hawk had finally made its money back.
Had finally broken even. That's
really how long it took.
Wow.
Like it really, this was not one of those movies where it's like, we'll make our money back at home video. No one gave a shit. And the reviews were merciless.
Yeah.
And everyone hated it. And I gotta tell you something. I mean, it's stupid. But it's cute.
Okay. I kind of love it. I kind of love Hudson Hawk. The premise... Okay. Dig this. The premise is... In... Leonardo da Vinci's time, Leonardo da Vinci developed a machine that could alchemically turn lead into bronze. His goal was to make a gigantic bronze statue, but there was a bronze shortage. Tried to turn lead into bronze.
By the way, bronze is an alloy, which means actually there was a shortage of other stuff.
Other things as well, but he thought he could turn lead directly into this alloy.
Yeah.
But because it didn't quite work right, he found a way to turn lead into gold.
Whoops. He kept it to himself for some reason. He kept the
secret to him. Gold is still valuable in his time. I don't know why he didn't use that.
Doesn't make any sense.
But evidently he was so miffed that it didn't work that there's like a central... Okay. There's a central crystal in the middle of his machine. This is still in the introduction of the movie. There's a crystal in the middle of this machine that he breaks into 3 parts and hides inside other inventions. Fast forward to the modern day. Hudson Hawk... It was Eddie, but his nickname is Hudson Hawk, played by Bruce Willis, is just getting out of prison, and he is evidently the world's greatest cat burglar, and he's in great demand by all the world's greatest criminals. You have to steal stuff for us. Frank Stallone.
As one of the Mario brothers. By the way, I want you to think about this. When did Super Mario Brothers, the movie, come out?
It was 93.
Okay. This was 2 years after Hudson Hawk had already done a broad, weird genre comedy starring 2 Italian guys whose last name was Mario and they were brothers. One of whom was played by Frank Stallone. Who never looked more like Sylvester Stallone than he does in this movie. For a second, I thought it was him. It was really weird.
He looks like Sylvester Stallone, specifically in Oscar.
Yeah. I actually like Oscar. A lot of people hate Oscar. I think Oscar's funny, but I digress. So the Mario brothers are, and also Hudson Hawk's parole agent,
his parole officer.
His parole officer. They both want to hire him to do a job.
To do heist.
The night he gets out.
As he's walking out of prison, his parole officer, he's still in the prison, and he's getting out, and he's walking out. His parole officer says, "Hey, if you need a job, I got this like heist you can do." It's like, can I please be at least out of prison before I start thinking about doing other heists? He is intending to go straight.
Mm-hmm. What's weird is that he keeps talking about how he what do I need? I need to find some type of real job. His best friend is Danny Aiello, and Danny Aiello, they co-own a bar. And while he's been gone, it turned into a yuppie bar. Oh, what a tragedy. And it's incredibly successful. You don't need to work.
Yeah.
You own half a bar. You don't need to do any of this shit.
And he doesn't want to. And Danny Aiello is like, I'd rather do heists just because, A, it's more fun, and B, I don't like these yuppies. So, I have this business, but I'd rather do the...
There's some cursory talk about how, like, the Mario brothers will have him killed, but the Mario brothers never feel like a real threat, so it doesn't play.
They exit the film early on as well. Yeah. So
one of the first things Danny Aiello does is hit one of them over the head with a wine bottle and, like...
And gets away with it.
Yeah, they don't kill him right away, so, like, they're not threats, but, yeah...
The relationship between Danny Aiello and Eddie is kind of great. They banter like they're old-fashioned Brooklyn guys from a movie in the 1920s. Like, their dialogue is so dated. And they have this weird quirk where Eddie actually has, in his mind, a fantastic capacity for remembering the lengths of pop songs.
Yeah, so we'd say
so Danny Aiello will yell out the title of a pop song and he can tell you exactly how long it is in seconds.
Swinging on a Star, 5 minutes, 22 seconds, like that kind of thing.
Which they use as a timing device when they do their heists. Like, well, we have to meet back here in exactly 2.5 minutes. Well, Swinging on a Star is 2.5 minutes, so start singing, and they just... And while they're doing the heist, they sing these old standards, and it takes over the soundtrack, and it undercuts all of the tension in the scene by making it into this big comic set piece.
And I'm going to say this
every single time.
I'm going to say this right now. If you're thinking to yourself, that's stupid. Not only would it be easier to get a watch and more accurate, but also they're making noise while they're stealing.
They're singing out loud.
Yeah, they're singing out loud the whole time. That's a stupid thing to do. Well, welcome to Hudson Hawk. Because here's the thing with Hudson Hawk. Hudson Hawk was not designed to be taken seriously. Hudson Hawk knows it's really stupid. It's not Naked Gun level of absurdity.
But it has
like some sort of inner reality, but it's a cartoon reality.
Everybody yells. Everybody's a really exaggerated character. Some moments of violence are punctuated by literal cartoon sound effects.
There's this really cute thing they do. I love this, and I've never seen another movie do this. There's 2 times in the movie where Bruce Willis jumps off a building.
And just jumps into the next scene.
And falls into the next scene. Now, the next scene wasn't literally underneath him. It's a scene transition. But he just drops into a chair, like, right in front of his love interest, played by Andy McDowell. And he's got, like, and he, like, fell through, like a truck full of chickens. And he's still covered in feathers and spitting out feathers. That's a really fun way to transition from one scene to another.
And you're not sure if he fell, like, literally off the truck into this chair next to Andy McDowell by some bizarre coincidence, or if it's just this really creative transition. Either way, it's dynamic and fantastic in this cartoony, chaotic way.
It's great cinema for that one shot. I want to make that clear.
Well, and there's another one where he jumps off of a building and, like, falls... like through the ceiling into a chair in front of the scene he's supposed to be in. Yeah. Again, he's not literally falling through the ceiling into this chair.
That's just, but they blur the line.
That location was not underground from what he was jumping off of.
But they blur the line. And that's really interesting and exciting, and it's very inventive.
And it keeps the action moving in a way that's chaotic but not dizzying.
I think of Hudson Hawk... the way I think of the movie within a movie in Last Action Hero. A movie I'm sure we're going to review at some point in the future. Last Action Hero, you might recall.
Also a big bomb.
It's a story about a young boy who's a big fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and he finds himself, due to a magic ticket, falling into the screen and into an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. What he discovers is that not only is the movie as broad as Commando, every single aspect of the world is that broad. There's this really great joke in Last Action Hero in which every couple of cops at the police station are a mismatched buddy pair.
Uh-huh.
That's a really, really funny gag.
To the point where there's an animated character, like one cop is paired up with an animated cat.
Yeah, like every single thing in the world of Last Action Hero is as big and stupid as it would be in the biggest, stupidest movie. Mm-hmm. My theory is Hudson Hawk takes place off in a corner of that. Once you start accepting this as like one of those like fake realities where everything is heightened and bizarre and people are vaguely aware that they're in a movie, it kind of blossoms a bit. And you just start appreciating, it's not always funny. A lot of the gags fall flat. But there's a verve to it that I think is really easy to appreciate.
There's something that we seem to have lost in a lot of more recent bouts of filmmaking. Even if something's paying homage to an old genre, there's still, I think, a little too careful an eye on truthfulness, on reality, on trying to keep it as realistic as possible.
The Batman Begins effect.
Yeah. This is a Batman world, but we're really trying to keep the gravity inside of it.
And he's got to have pointy ears. Why does he have pointy ears? Because there's a listening device in there. You could just think it looks neat. Like, you don't have to go that far. Like,
there was a time, and I think Tim Burton kind of was the centerpiece of all of this. Films before and after Batman were certainly part of this trend. Mm-hmm. Where films were a lot more expressionistic, and even big blockbusters, and they could be more boldly artificial in a way that films aren't anymore.
Oh, look at Dick Tracy.
Yeah, something like Dick Tracy. It's
fake,
it's
great.
And it's like a living comic. And I think a lot of filmmakers were a lot more free to play with that. And unfortunately, when you do it in something like Hudson Hawk, to really put the hammer into it, Super Mario Brothers, when you try to make something that is that sort of boldly artificial and strange and really kind of ambitious and, I would say, creative, audiences don't really know what to make of that.
Well, you want it to be grounded in some way. We need to have some sort of connection to the characters and their world. There needs to be something we can latch on to. In the case of something like Batman, the world is huge and operatic, but there is a central tragedy there that we can actually latch on to.
Yeah.
In some world, something like Hudson Hawk, everything is just super silly, and the only thing to latch on to is Bruce Willis' star power. Bruce Willis was a huge star at the time, but it's not enough.
Well, he's charming, and I get Hudson, but Hudson himself is a weird protagonist. He's a weird guy that has a lot of strange quirks. He seems out of place in his own movie intentionally. Like, he's an old guard 1920s New York guy in a comic book from the 90s. Just nothing makes sense here. And a common complaint I bring to a lot of big genre films is that the lead characters are always kind of ciphers. They're bland, typically white male characters who don't have a lot of personality, and the goal of that type of character is so an audience member can project themselves into that.
Which is really kind of an insult to the audience if you think about it. Like, this is what we think of you. We don't think you're interesting. We assume you're a white male.
Yeah, like, well, that's
which is also lame. And
horrible.
And it's just sort of just like, no, and I've said this before, I don't want to project myself into a movie. I suck. I went to a movie to see someone else's story. I want to see someone else be really, really interesting. It's much better to find someone I want to hang out with.
Yeah.
That's probably a better way to go for a protagonist in an action or blockbuster movie.
We have a protagonist. Hudson Hawk gives me what I want. We have a protagonist who's quirky and strange and lives in this strange world. We haven't even gotten to
the plot.
The CIA characters or James Coburn or the villains played by Sandra Bernhard and Richard E. Grant who are swinging for the walls, smashing them over, and looking for other walls to swing at.
Okay, let's get back to the plot here. So, Bruce Willis steals the horse. Turns out the horse had one of...
we didn't even mention that it was a horse that he was stealing, but he steals
a Da Vinci horse, and the horse has one of the pieces of...
the alchemical crystal inside.
The codex. And... it turns out there are two more out there, and people want him to steal it. Amongst the people who want Hudson Hawk to steal it, because only Hudson Hawk can do it, because he's the best thief ever... there are a CIA agent who is apparently directly responsible for Hudson Hawk going to prison in the first place because he did a job for the government, and then they disavowed him. He is working with a series of candy bar assassins.
He's working with some assassins who have code names, and one of them even mentions that all of their code names are now commercial candy bars. So there's a character named Kit Kat and Butterfinger and Almond Joy, who they call
Snickers.
and Snickers. They call her AJ. She says, and we're all candy bars, which I prefer because we used to be named after diseases.
For an entire year, I was named chlamydia. Like,
And those characters are like a Saturday morning cartoon that somehow escaped into Hudson Hawk.
Yeah, and one of them is played by a young David Caruso, who, of course, would go on to CSI Miami and NYPD Blue.
He plays Kit Kat, who doesn't speak.
Kit Kat doesn't speak. He speaks in a series of business cards with sayings on them, and he's always dressed up in some funny way. One time he's dressed up like Bruce Willis, and he's miming Bruce Willis's whole performance behind him in the shot. It's kind of funny. One time he's dressed up like Andy McDowell with a wig and a dress and everything, which is pretty impressive since he didn't know he was going to be wearing that. Another time he's dressed up like a statue in the middle of a museum. It's a really weird performance.
And when he moves like there's like stone sound effects. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So that's going on. They want him to steal it. But the big thing is Darwin and Minerva Mayflower. These incredible villains. They're the richest people in the world, I guess. And they live in this outlandish universe of their own creation, the kind of universe that you only can have if you are that kind of billionaire. They kidnap Hudson Hawk and they bring him into a big board meeting. And the board meeting consists of everyone sitting at a table that's like shaped like the letter M, and Sandra Bernhard like lounging in the middle of the table, lip syncing to "I got the power."
She's not lip syncing; she's singing.
She's singing. Well, she's quite good then. But like that's her. She's just singing "I got the power" because guess what? She has the power. They are. Imagine the biggest James Bond villain you can remember. The biggest, the broadest, the most ridiculous James Bond villain you can think of. Now, I want you to imagine a James Bond villain who is twice as broad as that. Multiply that by 5, and you've got Darwin and Minerva Mayflower. No one ever told them no. Like, that's my only theory. No one ever said too much. Someone always said, more, please.
Yeah.
And they did it. And they're great.
Well, I guess we'll just have to kill them. Fine, I'll shoot them. Blam, blam. Minerva, I was joking. Oh, my God. They're so great. They're hilarious. They undersell nothing.
There's a line they... Hold on a second. There's a line they have. I'm going to...
I love, and there's a
if Da Vinci was alive today, he'd be eating microwave sushi naked in the back of a Cadillac with the both of us. Microwave sushi?
That's not a thing.
That's not a thing.
No.
But it's funny to say it.
Yeah.
So they ship him, like in a box, off to Rome, where he has to rob the Vatican. And he does.
Yeah, and there's a series of heists, all of which are very clever.
They wouldn't really work, but in a movie way, they're fun.
In a movie way, they work. Yeah. They're tense, and you follow what's going on, and it makes sense in a movie logic sort of way.
Bruce Willis romances a historian, played by Andy McDowell, who he doesn't realize is actually an agent for the Vatican and actually a nun. So all this sexual tension can go nowhere.
Because she's taken a vow of chastity.
Yeah, and she drugs him, and because she's actually like double crossing everybody, and everybody's double crossing everybody, and frankly, it's a little confusing.
That doesn't matter.
But it all boils down to the Mayflowers get the big device. There's a huge action sequence. They fly off of this exploding castle
in a Da Vinci plane.
In a Da Vinci plane, which of course worked because flight was invented 1,000 years earlier than you thought. And then Danny Aiello, who betrayed them but didn't betray him, and then they blew up an entire building while shooting bombs out of a gun and singing side by side.
Side by side.
Yeah.
It's the bomb gun. It's such a weird conceit.
Because it shoots like suction cup bombs.
Suction cup bomb. And you can put timed mines on a suction cup and just shoot it at a wall and run away.
It's not a grenade launcher. Those exist. This is a stupid thing they made up. And
one sucks to a person's forehead in one scene.
Yeah, it's really fucked up. And Danny Aiello dies in a big explosion, and then right at the end when they land the Da Vinci airplane right outside a coffee shop,
everything's taken care of. Bad guy is bested.
Bruce Willis and Andy McDowell's just I still haven't had an espresso yet. A cappuccino. He wants a cappuccino. Still haven't had a cappuccino.
It's a running gag, by the way. Yeah, they mention it in the first scene, and it comes
every time he orders a cappuccino, someone shoots it out of his hand, and
or
he's just
the machine explodes. Something happens.
He finally gets his cappuccino, and then Danny Aiello shows up. Hey, I'm alive! And Bruce Willis is we saw you die, and he was just no. It was a fancy, expensive, rich person car, and they had a sprinkler system on inside. And Bruce Willis has a line that I think unlocks the whole movie. If you haven't already figured up on it, yeah. that's probably what happened. Like, the movie is just like, fuck it.
I don't know. Why not? It's
we don't
fun.
give a shit.
I'm gonna bring him back for whatever reason.
Yeah, we just want Danny Aiello back. We like Danny Aiello. And then they laugh, and then the narrator says, and he got his cup of coffee, and then the credits roll.
To swing it on a star.
I feel like I want to like this movie a little more than I actually like it.
Okay.
Because it's got an infectious energy to it. There's a lot of really dynamic Looney Tunes, like live-action Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
Kind of filmmaking to it. And I love all that. And I think if you want to, like, try to find a way to make a very dynamic comedy, I think you could study Hudson Hawk and look at what it does well and also what it doesn't do well, and you could learn a lot. I think there's enough jokes that land that it's mostly works. There's one joke that Butterfinger makes that is a sexual assault joke, which comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's not funny. It wasn't funny then. It's really not funny now. And it just... Where did that come from? Like, it's not... What the fuck? But for the most part, the tone is pretty consistently light. And it just sort of coasts on charm. It should not have cost $65 million in 1991. That's a huge mistake.
There were some, like, impressive special effects. They did have to travel around and shoot on location. It has a huge cast, of course.
There were some cool sets and things. Like, I get it, but, like, yeah, no, this should never have been the expensive, crazy thing it was. If this was a smaller movie, I think it probably would have been at least fondly remembered by some people. Instead, because it was a box office bomb, it's got this huge stigma against it, and I think people are just ready to write it off without ever having seen it.
That's true with a lot of bombs, actually. Sure. Some bombs aren't bad. Some just didn't hit for whatever reason. Most of them are plain. They're, like, kind of average.
Yeah. I invite everyone to think about, and I'm sure everyone, if they really thought about it, they can think of at least one. I want you to think about a movie you've heard from a lot of different people, or from history, or from Wikipedia, or list of the worst movies ever made. Movie that you heard was terrible, that you accept in your mind is terrible, but you never actually bothered to watch for yourself.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to watch it. You don't. But it might not be. And in fact, standards and ideas about movies change over time. And sometimes we look back at a movie that was branded as terrible, and we see that by today's standards, it's not bad. Or it did something kind of inventive that was ahead of its time and might actually be worth watching. And I would say Hudson Hawk, though not amazing...
No, it's amazing. It's pretty great.
It's amazing that it exists,
yeah.
But I would argue as an actual movie, it's just kind of this light kerfuffle. But it's cute, and I think it deserves to be watched.
I think it's like an explosion in the Nickelodeon slime factory. It's so colorful and just acerbically chaotic. And is clearly enjoying itself so much that you can't really help but kind of fall in love with it.
Yeah.
It is trying to do as many silly ideas as it can. It feels, it's golly. We keep saying Saturday morning cartoons. We compare it to cartoons because it has that cartoonish energy.
That's the only way to describe it. That's the only thing it is.
And I like every single one of the characters. I like all of the performances. Just everybody is so eager to make this thing work that I feel it does. And I think when you're going to a movie theater and you're expecting an action comedy along the lines of, say, Lethal Weapon 2 or Die Hard, something that has a lot of action with some humor in it, and you get this chaotic heist caper comedy mishmash thing that you're not really sure what to make of, you're going to need to wait a couple years before you can even make sense of that thing.
Yeah. So
or you need to be 13.
When it came down to find the right double feature for Hudson Hawk, we mostly thought of heist movies because it's a heist movie at heart. We haven't really talked about those yet. I love a good heist movie. And
we instantly, of course, went to the greatest of all heist movies.
Rififi.
Rififi is the greatest of all heist movies.
Arguably. I also thought of The Italian Job, which is sort of wacky and fun as well.
That would be the original The Italian Job.
The remake is okay, but the original is great.
Yeah.
And we put it out there on Facebook. We said, if anyone can guess which double feature we're going to use, I will give you a shout out on the show. We picked a weird one, so you didn't guess it. But a lot of the guesses were really, really clever. And I just want to give a couple of shout-outs to some of the ones where I'm just like, oh, that would have been good. Let's see what we got here. Road to Singapore. would have been a really fun one. So thank you, Eric, for suggesting that. That's a neat idea. Let's see.
Be the Bing and Bob road movies.
Let's see what we got here. The Sting was mentioned a couple of times, where Fifi was mentioned. How to Steal a Million, which is actually one of my favorite heist movies.
Oh, look, I haven't seen How to Steal a Million.
It's adorable. Stars Audrey Hepburn and Peter O'Toole. That would have been really, really fun as well. Thank you, Brett, for that suggestion. That's a good one.
Did someone suggest Touche Pas Grisby?
I don't think so.
Oh, that's a pity. That was one I was really leaning heavily toward.
Lance suggested Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and yeah, actually there's a lot of similarities, so that makes sense. Jen suggested To Catch a Thief.
Which we also came close to selecting.
Yeah, that was actually our second bet. Paul said, just because it's Bibbs and Witney, I'm going to say Sneakers. And that was one of my suggestions. I would have loved to have talked about Sneakers. I love Sneakers. The Killing was suggested as well. There's a lot. No one suggested Danger Diabolik.
Now, Danger Diabolik is another one that you might have in your brain as a bad movie because it was featured on the final episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
The final episode before it got rebooted by Netflix.
Oh, that, yeah.
But I'm still mad at Mystery Science Theater 3000 for this. Now, Mystery Science Theater 3000, they would take a quote-unquote bad movie and they'd riff on it and it'd be really, really funny. Some were worse than others. I think there's a couple of the older culty, horror movies that they were deserved a little bit better than Mystery Science Theater 3000 did for its reputation.
Well, a lot of those movies are appealingly odd when you see them out of their context. A film like Zat, which they aired as The Bloodwaters of Dr. Z, that's an odd movie and is fun to watch on its own right. I'm never going to say that's a good film and deserves better than getting riffed on by Mystery Science Theater. I think there are
some movies that are better than their reputation by MST3K suggests, or at least more interesting. Like when you look at, like, as an early example of a female-driven action movie, The Gunslinger. Yeah, it's a cheap Roger Corman movie. Narratively, it's actually really interesting, and I actually like sort of researching it from that perspective.
I'm not going to go too far to defend The Gunslinger.
I like The Gunslinger, mostly because I like Beverly Garland. I think she was a badass.
Beverly Garland is great. That's a crap film.
Whatever. Danger Diabolik, directed by Mario Bava. It's an adaptation of a comic book, and it is great. It's weird. I will grant you it's weird, and if you watch it from out of nowhere, expecting it to be like any other superhero movie you've ever seen, you're going to be very confused, and you might think it's bad. But I put it to you, that you look at it from the right perspective, this movie is sexy 60s punk rock.
It's sexy 60s something or other.
It's very chaotic.
It's terrific. And we were looking for something with Hudson Hawk that had that kind of wild heist caper effect. And I think we have an opportunity here to rescue from their bad reputations both Hudson Hawk and Danger Diabolik.
Yeah.
Because I think they're both quite good movies. Danger Diabolik, like you said, based on a comic book, stars John Philip Law as the title character, Diabolik.
John Philip Law is probably best known from the movie Barbarella. He played the angel guy. And they're both Dino De Laurentiis joints, so that explains there's a lot of overlap in the cast.
He is also Jude Law's father. And
is he actually?
You look at his face, and
Okay, I thought that was a cool. No, okay, cool.
They're both named Law, and they look identical. Yeah, he's Jude Law's father.
No. John Philip Law is... No. He's not.
He's Jude Law's father.
Not according to the internet.
The internet's wrong.
I'm seeing he's American.
What?
John Philip Law is American.
I had in my head that he was Jude Law's father.
I was literally going to say on the podcast, I'm surprised they're not related because they look just like each other and they have the same name. No, they're not related.
No, they are related.
They're not.
I swear he's his father. I have been operating under a misconception for many years.
This happens to everybody.
You just exploded my brain. I never even bothered to confirm.
They're not.
What are you talking about?
They just you would imagine it.
Oh my god, my brain is melting.
But he is not
melting out my nose.
But they look like each other.
They look like each other.
If they played father and son, he would have totally bought it. But no, they don't. It's just super weird.
That is so strange.
Okay, backtracking. And I'm going to leave that in the podcast just to show it happens to everybody.
Oh my god, my brain.
I know. You watch Danger Diabolik, look at the eyes, and you're just like, oh, it's Jude Law. Oh, no, it's John Philip Law. Oh, they must be related. They're not. It's really weird. Diabolik is the name of the protagonist of Danger Diabolik. Diabolik is a comic book character created by Angela and Luciana Giussani. The character was consistently in print for many decades, had over 800 issues of that comic. And he's the bad guy. He's not a good guy.
He's the anti-hero.
He's the anti-hero. He is basically a Batman villain in a world where there is no Batman. He's just as broad, just as big, pulls just all the crazy heists that someone like Cesar Romero would have pulled off in the Adam West Batman stuff, but he doesn't have a weird, kinky shtick to it. And his relationship to his Harley Quinn, if you will, is really healthy. It's loving and romantic.
And super sexual.
Yeah. Oh. So it stars John Philip Law as Diabolik and Marissa Mell as his girlfriend, Ava Kant. And they pull off a series of heists. They're pursued by a well-intentioned but not particularly bright inspector named Inspector Ginkgo, played by Michael Piccoli, or Michelle Piccoli. And they run afoul of another kind of over-the-top supervillain named Valmont, played by the great Adolfo Celli.
Yeah. You've probably seen Adolfo Celli in
he was in
B movies before.
He was in a bunch of MST3K movies, many of which deserve to be MST3K movies.
Oh my God, Peter Robert Law. I'm sorry, I'm still looking this up.
This weird?
Still blows my mind.
It blew my mind the first time I found it out, too. You just sort of make this assumption, and they're not related at all.
Oh, God, all right.
I love how... So Mario Bava at this time was actually probably best known as a filmmaker of horror movies, and indeed, he did a lot of them.
A lot of good ones, too.
Oh, yeah, he directed some of the best horror movies ever. Actually, if you ask me. Let's see, what was it? Was it Black Sunday was his?
Yeah.
Black Sunday is...
Black Sunday is probably his most celebrated.
Yeah, Black Sunday is fantastic. Also, Black Sabbath, different movie, still very good. He did Planet of the Vampires.
Which is actually kind of a boring film.
I know, but it's fun. He did Bay of Blood, which is actually very influential on the slasher genre.
He did,
but he did everything. He did Hercules movies. He did a movie called Dr. Goldfoot and the Girl Bombs, and
in the 50s he did a really great Italian vampire film called I Vampiri, which is really quite good.
Okay, but what he was incredibly stylish, and what he made here was basically one of the sexiest movies ever, because Diabolik, in his skin-tight suit and his perfect mask and his incredibly sexy girlfriend and their incredible underground leisure pad, which is basically like the coolest supervillain lair ever. And they just spend all of their days wallowing in money, having sex with each other, and then they see on the news that, like, oh, there's a new emerald necklace coming into the city, and they're like, well, I'm going to steal that for your birthday. And she's like, ooh.
Well, no, she asks for it. They're watching, they're laying in a bed of money, naked, covered in cash, having just had, what is presumably like sex that could shoot a hole through the earth.
For 20 hours, no doubt.
20 straight hours, and they're, clear spent, but their hair is perfect. And they're laying in a bed of money, and he leans over and he says, "Happy birthday, darling." And they would start having sex again had they not already been doing it for 20 hours. He's like, "Oh, thanks, babe. What do you want for your birthday?" They're watching TV, and there's a story about an emerald necklace. She just points and says, "That necklace." And his eyes begin shifting. Is like, how can I steal that necklace?
And it
comes up with the perfect plan.
Yeah, and the plan is super elaborate and crazy, and requires him to scale like this giant mountain with these cool suction pump things. Yeah.
You said suction pump.
There's a cool Beastie Boys music video, which is just an homage to Danger Diabolik.
Oh, cute.
So if this sounds familiar, you've probably seen it. I think they might have reused some footage, but I'm not entirely sure.
Diabolik's goal is not just to amass wealth. Clearly, he has enough.
Oh, yeah. He's doing fine.
He's doing just fine. He's sleeping literally in cash. He's got a bed that is about 30 feet across.
Yeah.
He has access to any kind of weird vehicle he wants. And, really nice tailored, I guess his suit, I think, is like stretchy Italian leather, or maybe it's a wetsuit.
It looks great.
It forms direct, like right around his face. It's been molded onto his face. He looks like a superhero in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he looks cool.
Yeah, he looks, and his girlfriend is dressed in the most stylish stuff.
But yeah, he only has two real goals. He doesn't really need the money. He is basically putting one over on the government. And every time we see a government agent, they are
represented by Terry Thomas. So we know it's supposed to be this like comedic buffoon.
Yeah, they're all stuck up people who are convinced of their own power and authority, and they're all just like, oh, this, Diabolik will never be able to stop us. And Diabolik's just like, challenge accepted, Jesus.
And they keep on setting up, like, literal, like, action movie challenges for him. Well, let's see him try to steal this. We're going to put all the gold in the government in one gigantic ingot.
Yeah, 15 tons in one chunk. let's try to get that, Diabolik. And Diabolik's just like, done.
There are easier ways and safer ways to transport that. They're openly daring Diabolik. It's like, well, what's something that this guy could not do? How about a 20-ton ingot?
So there's that, but also, and this is something I really keyed into when I just rewatched this last night. He's also doing it for love. He's doing it because this is what he and his girlfriend love doing. And when she gets threatened by everything, that's when the heroic side of Diabolik comes out. So the plot really kicks in. There's a cool opening heist, but then the plot really kicks in when the inspector actually teams up with
an evil like the most evil of all gangsters.
Yeah, Valmont, which is basically like if early on, before Commissioner Gordon teamed up with Batman, he like teamed up with the Penguin to take down the Joker. Like that's the idea we got here. So the inspector basically makes a deal with this big crime boss named Valmont.
He's less like the Penguin. He's more like Blofeld.
It's like the Kingpin.
Yeah, it's just super criminal par excellence.
Anyway.
He's got a button that drops rivals into the ocean.
From an airplane, which doesn't like affect like the air pressure in the airplane at all, which is...
No, it was on a ship.
No, they were in a plane.
The trapdoor was on a ship.
No, they were in an airplane, because then they drop out of it and you see him fall through the sky.
Well, it's like in between the two hulls of a catamaran, isn't it? He falls into the water.
You think he has two trapdoors.
Yeah.
And then there's one in an airplane.
Okay.
That's the thing.
All right.
Anyway. He makes a deal. Said it's like Fritz Lang's M. Like let the criminals catch him. And so Valmont says he's gonna set a trap, and he ends up kidnapping Diabolik's girlfriend. And Diabolik has to give up the necklace that he just rightfully stole, and get him back. And so he gives Valmont the necklace, and then Valmont's just gonna shove Diabolik off of an airplane, and Diabolik grabs Valmont and jumps off the airplane with him. Right after, he makes sure that Valmont has the necklace, because that's his girlfriend's necklace. He stole that. He's a romantic. And he ends up on an island, and there's a whole bunch of cops, and he fakes his own fucking death using, like, Tibetan techniques that Batman stole. And then he, like, wakes up in the middle of
his autopsy.
In the middle of his autopsy, and then he just, like, dresses up as an old man, and then he hid the emeralds in Valmont's body. Like his dead body, he shoved the emeralds in there so that when he was cremated, they would all just be there for him. And then he just grabs them out of the ashes and he runs away. And it's great. He's such a badass.
What this movie does is cool.
Yeah.
It's cool is its raison d'etre. It is what it is trying to define. The way Diabolik is cool is kind of a proto-version of the way cool characters 20 years on would try to aspire to. There was a cool that kind of leaked out of a character like James Bond. He was suave, he was confident. But he wasn't as capable as Diabolik, which is a strange thing to say about James Bond, who could survive any situation.
He's not a schemer.
He's not a schemer, and he also was like sort of genuinely threatened. Diabolik always came out on top. There was never any question as to whether or not he was going to succeed here. You wanted this guy to succeed. His girlfriend was threatened. That he would not abide by that. But you realize when his girlfriend is threatened, that's not a threat to her. That's a threat to her kidnapper. Her kidnapper is screwed.
You just did something real stupid.
Yeah, it's like killing John Wick's dog. You don't do that.
Yeah, like that's kind of the idea. And she's a fine character as well. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is he's an agent of anarchy.
Yeah.
Like, that's the cool thing about him. Like, that's why I call it punk rock, because James Bond is suave and sophisticated as it is.
But he's a government agent.
He's a tool of the man. He's just trying to maintain order. Diabolik is about breaking the order down, man, in a way that is fun, and a way that is always targeted at people who deserve it. There's a great bit where
the pills scene with the laughing gas.
Oh, yeah, he like spikes a big press conference with laughing gas, but that's not the best part.
All right.
The best part is when like the government just says, "Oh, well, you stole $15 million from us. Great, we'll take it back from the people. We'll turn all the people against him." And Diabolik blows up every office of the IRS, destroying every record of everyone's taxes. And the government just has to say, "Hey, yeah, we're going to have to do taxes on the honor system this year. So just pay what what you think you owe. So he basically pulls a Fight Club on it, and it's that Fight Club level of anarchy, but with a level of sort of whimsy that makes it more palatable. Fight Club is obviously a screed against that kind of anarchy. Diabolik came from a much less anarchic time.
I understand why you call it punk rock, because it does sort of tap into that adolescent need to rebel against the man, and Diabolik is the figure you want to be when you're just figuring out how to rebel against the man. It's like, if I were this capable, sexy dude who has, I'm the world's hottest man. I'm dating the world's hottest woman. I have the greatest skills and all the money in the world. What am I going to do with it? I know. Just fuck the man.
Yeah.
Why not? Because I can.
And honestly, and you can say, like, when you're watching Danger Diabolik, and it's paced differently than a lot of contemporary films, and I get that, and it might seem a little slow.
But goodness no, there's always something interesting going on.
I think there's a couple of bits where they're just sort of luxuriating in the set dressing. That people
what set dressing?
What set dressing? And that's kind of my point. A lot of the films, and you even talked about this when we were talking about Hudson Hawk, this sort of expressionistic wave of action blockbuster cinema we had in the early 90s with Dick Tracy and Tim Burton's Batman. There was a lot of style over substance, and Danger Diabolik is definitely a progenitor of a lot of that. It's certainly a superhero/villain movie, which is all about its style. But what style?
But
there's a lot of great shots in this movie. There's a really fun bit where they're trying to use like a sketch artist machine in order to figure out what Ava Kant looks like so they can kidnap her, and they just cut to animation as her face, a bunch of different faces morph into each other, and it's really creative and fun and beautiful, and we haven't even talked about it. One of the great superhero comic book movie scores.
The score is still stuck in my head.
Okay, the score is... There are two movie soundtracks, I'm convinced, that if you're on a date, you put them on in the background, it's going to be a great date. One is Superfly, one of the greatest movie soundtracks ever. The other is Danger Diabolik. Danger Diabolik has two moods. One
which it rotates back and forth between rather rapidly. Sometimes within a scene.
One is badass surfer. And it just has... Let's do it. It's the
over and over again.
It's the music you want to drive a sports car to. When you're driving a sports car and you think to yourself, I'm finally on top of the world, you put in that theme from Danger Diabolik, and the world's your oyster. And the other thing it has...
specifically an Italian sports car.
Yes. And the other bit it has, and this is music by Ennio Morricone, because of course... it has one of the sexiest lounge songs you've ever heard.
Gosh,
Deep Down is... Ooh.
Deep Down. My wife had an ambition at one point to kind of make a CD compilation of all of the really sexy songs from exploitation movies from the 60s and 70s. Because a lot of them had theme songs with lyrics. Even movies people forgot about, like the Minx or the Circle or the Bitch or Radley Metzger's score. These all have really, really terrific theme songs that
mostly forgotten,
deserve to be well remembered hit. Sweet Talking Candyman from Beyond the Valley of the Dolls might be the only one that's kind of lingering in the pop consciousness.
And even then, only if you know how to look for it.
I suppose so.
Yeah, but this is a treat, and I really, really hope that anyone who's like listening to this podcast gives Danger Diabolik a chance. It's only bad if you think old and different is bad. I really do think this is... You get on the wavelength, you picture it like, imagine the Adam West Batman series if the Joker was the star and he didn't do a clown thing. That's it. It's just suave, sexy, fun heists, cool set pieces, great costumes, great production design, awesome music. And honestly, even just the way the story is told, because it's not like a problem. It's like that story we told you. The movie goes on for like another half hour. It's a series of heists. That's it. And it's just like you read like 4 great Diabolik comics in a row, but it wasn't like a contained narrative. And it actually ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. But what a cliffhanger! It's so cool. Yeah, I love it. I love Danger Diabolik. I'm glad we're able to...
It's really, really terrific. I don't know what it was about Italian cinema, and I'm sure there's, there are people who have done research and could talk more eloquently on this than I could, but Italian cinema in like from the late 50s all the way through the 70s just sort of went for broke. And there was this big explosion of genre films that kind of have a really high cult regard in America now. Danger Diabolik is part of this wave where the colors are greater, the storytelling is wilder, the characters are stranger. You have people like Dario Argento and Lucio Fulci who are coming out of this school of exploitation filmmaking that any modern American audience would groove all over if they got the chance. Because these movies are so innovative and so visually, I don't want to say daring, they're just sort of visually overreaching in a way that a lot of American filmmakers try to not be. They try to stay restrained.
There's a lot of like American filmmakers who are aiming for a level of realism, as we talked about before. We got to have this sort of plausible docudrama, you are there thing. It's like, no!
We don't need that.
We're making everything into an opera.
All films, all fictional films are to a degree kind of melodramatic. I mean,
to a degree.
The mainstream Hollywood feature films that you're going to see are all basically melodramas, and they're trying to scale back the falseness of it. And just last week we were talking about sort of the grandness, the grandiosity, the operatic qualities of silent film, and I think this is where the strength of cinema really lies, is when you can create an imaginary world that is very aggressively imaginary, that celebrates the artistry of it and doesn't necessarily draw you in with these fake hints at realism. If you're going to go for realism, go all the way. Go with a Mike Leigh film. Go with a Fassbinder film. Don't. Well, not all Fassbinder films, but yeah.
To clarify, last week we were talking about silent cinema, not on Critically Acclaimed, but on a bonus podcast called All the Best, in which Witney and I would review all of the nominees for Best Picture in order, starting with the very first year. We recorded a pilot for that, and you can listen to that over at the Cancel Too Soon podcast. You can just search for Cancel Too Soon, cancel with one L, on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever fine podcasts are fine podcasted. And that might actually end up becoming a regular series, so we're very excited about that. So that's a fun episode, and we got to talk about some really cool movies.
Just both Hudson Hawk and Danger Diabolik scratched that artificiality itch that cinema needs to do every once in a while.
And they're both films that are kind of at the edge of cult status. I think there's an awareness of both of them, but they're not as popular as they should be. And we're arguing right now, we're taking this opportunity to say...
hoist them both up.
Especially Danger Diabolik. I'm a particularly huge fan of Danger Diabolik. But Hudson Hawk is so weird. And in a way that is, even if it doesn't always work, it's always engaging. I think it deserves to be seen. And if you remember it being bad, try to ask yourself, was it bad because of what you expected? Or is it bad because it failed to do what it did? Or is it bad just because you weren't in the mood for it at the time? Or maybe you just don't think it works at all, and that's fine too. But there are a lot of reasons to think something is bad that doesn't actually have anything to do with whether or not it failed. And I think Hudson Hawk fell victim to a lot of that. I think it fell victim to weird expectation and sort of being ahead of its time in a lot of ways. And there you go. Next week on Critically Acclaimed. In addition to reviewing the new releases, Breaking In, Life of the Party, Lou Over the Wall, we're going to be reviewing a film of your choice. You go to Schmoville on Facebook, Schmoville with an exclamation point. We're going to have a poll up on Sunday. And the poll will consist of films by great filmmakers that suck. Or at least notoriously suck. So we're going to talk about, you have the choice of Brian De Palma's The Bonfire of the Vanities. Brian De Palma actually made a couple of bad movies, but that's the one that's most notorious.
He actually made several, but...
Michael Mann, best known. Bonfire of the Vanities is an adaptation of a big melodramatic book. Michael Mann, best known for his very serious, very realistic crime dramas like Heat, and Thief, and Collateral. He also directed a horror movie about Nazis occupying a haunted castle called The Keep, which he tried to keep away from us for many years.
And it got out.
Stars a young Ian McKellen before anyone knew who he was. It's weird. And finally, arguably, I would argue this, the worst film ever directed by Alfred Hitchcock, a very dramatically inert spy movie called Topaz.
Yeah.
So you're going to pick one of those movies, we will review it, and we will pair it with another film. That will be a good film, damn it. And we think you'll like it.
That is thematically appropriate.
Yeah, maybe it's directed by the same person, maybe not. I don't know. We haven't gotten there yet. It's going to depend on what you pick. We don't pick these things out in advance. We always wait until you pick something and then we talk.
Then we start thinking about it.
Because then we get too excited.
Yeah.
All right. We have time for a few letters.
Okay.
So let's read a few letters. You can email us criticallyacclaimedfans@gmail.com with your questions, concerns, debate topics, anything at all, really. Just let us know and we'll give it a chat.
Comments in general.
Yeah. What do you got, Witney?
Let me scroll. I'm going to get back to the earliest one that we haven't read yet.
Okay.
So here's a letter from Simon. Greetings, lifelong Star Wars fan here, 39 years old. Despite having watched The Last Jedi at least 10 times by now, I still hate the movie.
Huh.
I found that the only way in which I can sit through this movie and appreciate it is by considering it as an anime. Once my mind switches to this, quote, register, the dialogue, tone, and pacing suddenly make a lot more sense, and most of my criticism of the movie simply vanishes. Intriguing. The other example I have for this is Alien Resurrection, which I love, but I can only think of it as a comic book. You see that in comic book panels. It maybe makes more sense. My question is, which movies do you think fail as feature-length motion pictures, but would be amazing if translated into another medium? Love every minute of the show. Thank you for broadening my horizons and providing giggles. Food for thought for free. Simon.
That's interesting. And I think trying to look at movies from a different perspective if you don't like them can be really illuminating. Now, sometimes they just don't work. And sometimes they work if you jettison what you expected or what you wanted and try to, consider from a different angle. A case in point of this is Batman and Robin, for me. Batman and Robin, it's a pretty bad Batman movie, actually. I think they're trying to be more in line with the 1960s sort of light, cheesy Batman, and that's fine in theory, but they didn't have any of the deftness or the humor or the wit that made that work. They still kept trying to make it brawny and broody, and it just did not fly. But as a result, it's just this big bunch of silliness. However, if you took Batman and Robin, shot for shot, costume for costume, and you called it a luchador movie, everyone would say it's the best thing ever. It'd be really incredible.
It'd be viewed at midnight screenings on the regular.
Yeah, it'd be a big fucking deal. So when I watch it in terms of just looking at it from a different genre, I can get into Batman and Robin because it's not fitting any other mold.
It has a luchador in it, for goodness sake.
Yes, it does. Bane is dressed like a luchador.
He's dressed like a luchador. He's got the same mask. So if you watch it with the foreign, if you can find one with a Spanish language track, or find I don't think the American DVD has a Spanish language track. It has a French language track.
I came upon this perspective quite accidentally when I was shifting through channels and I saw Batman and Robin on a Spanish language station, and I was like, oh, I get it now.
This makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
If you can find a foreign DVD of it from that has a Spanish language track, try to see that. See what it does.
It's a lot of fun.
See if it plays like a luchador film.
Anything come to your mind?
Golly, if it looks like it's a different genre.
Or medium, even.
Or a different medium. There are a lot of films that I think would have done a lot better if they were made with tiny, tiny budgets. And the one that I think about most frequently is Guardians of the Galaxy. I know a lot of people really love Guardians of the Galaxy. They think it's impeccable. I understand why people love it. Don't quite understand why people cry during it, but that's an issue of mine. I think if Guardians of the Galaxy hadn't been made for literally a tenth of the budget, and 15 years ago, it would have been one of the greatest films of all time.
Right.
Also it was rated R. Because at its heart, that needs to be a trauma movie. It needs to have that kind of sleazy trashiness to really kind of elevate that material. I feel like it only kind of faints in the direction of subversiveness rather than actually being subversive at all. And I think that that's what that movie really needs and what it really wants. So Disney and Marvel, get your hands off of Guardians of the Galaxy. Lloyd Kaufman, come in. Put the F word in the mouth of that raccoon. That's what needs to happen with that movie. Anyway, another letter.
Let's do another letter.
Here's a letter from CJ Schwiggity. Hello, CJ Schwiggity.
Best name ever.
I really hope that's your real name. I recently engaged in an interesting debate on what qualifies as a horror movie and what qualifies as a thriller.
We're about to get to this again.
That old hat trick. I've come to realize many people think a film needs to qualify as horror to it either A, has to scare the shit out of their pants. It was in there to begin with.
Well, it needs to get out eventually.
I suppose so. Or B, involve in something supernatural, i.e. A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Conjuring. I do not share this belief. It implies that we are the ones to judge if a film is horror rather than the content itself. I don't think that's fair. Jaws, The Silence of the Lambs, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and The Conjuring don't scare me, but I would call them all horror films. My barometer for a film, if it is horror or just merely has elements of the genre, is this. If the film plays on the protagonist's fears and they themselves are scared. For example, Get Out is a horror film because it plays on Chris's fears of being marginalized by his girlfriend's white family, fearing that they will be hostile towards him, and his fears are proved true in the movie. Now, I realize that this casts a very broad net across multiple genres, but I would argue that many films have different genres within them. Curious what you guys think, what my flawed logic might be.
I feel like we've talked about this before, and I think you put it real well. Horror movies are about dying, and thrillers are about staying alive.
Yeah.
And I think that was a good description as well in the email when it's about playing off of a fear. The idea that if it doesn't scare you, it's not a horror movie is a fallacy. Because horror is not a qualitative statement. Horror is a genre. Genres are genres because they can be quantified. Because you can point to things and say these movies have these similarities. Action movies have action sequences, for example.
Yeah.
Romantic comedies have romance and comedy. Boom. Horror has to, and they don't have to successfully do those things. There's a lot of romantic comedies that are neither romantic nor funny, but you can tell they're trying.
Yeah.
Horror movies don't have to be scary to be horror movies. They just have to be trying to be scary. They have to be trying to get under your skin, and if they don't get under your skin, they might get under someone else's. They might be playing off of a fear you don't have, or an anxiety you don't have, or an experience you don't have, and maybe yet. You know, maybe it's an experience you'll have eventually as you grow up and you have different experiences and you understand why certain things are scary and why other things aren't. We're having this conversation a lot about what is a horror movie, and frankly, I find it increasingly ludicrous that we keep having to have this conversation.
Well, I think it's because... I don't know why, and I don't know where this comes from, and this is only something I've encountered recently, but evidently, horror has some sort of stigma attached to it.
I thought we were past this.
We have. We've been past it for a century, but like I said, this is only something I've recently encountered on like places like Twitter, so who knows. But yeah, evidently, horror movies are now associated, only starting now, associated with, like, the trashiest of the trash. Like, only trashy movies can be called horror movies, and if they're not trashy, then they're no longer horror. And I don't agree with that at all, and I didn't think that was even something we'd had to start addressing. And this really embarrassing phrase started to come up through the discourse, elevated horror. That it's horror,
oh, I hate that shit.
But it's good.
I've also heard post-horror.
Oh yeah, I think post-horror describes like some sort of new experimental style, like Alex Garland's movies might be post-horror.
No.
But
no, they're horror. Well, actually, Alex Garland's sci-fi, but okay.
No, yeah, but yeah. You look at something like Annihilation, and that deals with a lot more abstracts, and it's not so much Bugatti or even necessarily fear. It's about sort of the mechanics of fear. And I can understand why something like that might be called post-horror in sort of an intellectual context.
Post implies after horror. We're still in horror. I think that's a mistake.
And we'll never be out of horror. Horror has consistently been the one genre that has proven to be appealing and profitable throughout the entire history of cinema. No other genre has ever had that.
Yeah, like here's the thing. We'll never not have horror movies. Everyone's like, oh, is horror dead? Like I can set my watch to that.
Yeah.
Every 5 years.
8 years or
so.
Yeah,
there's going to be a big article in Entertainment Weekly or LA Times or some big publication talking about, oh, is horror dead? No. A few horror trends are dying out, but just because found footage movies aren't popular anymore doesn't mean horror is dead. Horror always does great. There's some years are better than others, but almost every year there's at least a couple of amazing horror movies that come out. Horror is fantastic, and the reason why is because horror is primal. Horror, like comedy.
We all die.
We all die. And it's an emotion we all have. We all fear. That's it. We all fear.
Yeah.
We fear something. If you say, oh, I don't fear, yeah, you do. There's something you fear. Might not be obvious. Might be something that's odd or deep-seated. But we're all afraid of something, and horror latches into that, and it gives us an outlet for it, an outlet that allows us to plunge into the depths of our souls and then emerge on the other side okay. That's the gloriousness of horror. That's why I love the horror genre.
And even if the characters end up badly, you at least get to leave the theater.
Yeah.
You're okay. I've said this before, I think on this very podcast. I've run into a lot of people who kind of like to brag about the fact that horror movies don't scare them. I go to horror movies don't scare me.
We've talked about this too.
Okay, take the Machismo in your hands, put it in a box, lock the box and put it on a shelf, and go to a horror movie.
And also set that shelf on fire.
Then set the shelf on fire. You don't need that stupid Machismo. You don't need to brag about how horror movies don't scare you.
Feelings are great.
First of all, feelings are great. Bragging that a film doesn't work for you doesn't do anything for you or for the film. If you are open to that film scaring you, and it does, then you are enriching your experience, aren't you? You are allowing to explore your own fear and explore your own feelings. Let the film scare you. You don't need to resist the movie, and look for films that scare you. If most films don't, look for the ones that do. Seek out the things that might seem like they do frighten you. And there's a whole, there's genres upon subgenres of horror movies out there in the world that you probably haven't tried yet.
Werewolf bikers, actual subgenre.
There are many werewolf bikers.
There's an inverse of what you're talking about, and I want to talk about that too, because I run into a lot of people when I say, like, I've written a lot about the horror genre, and they say, I want to watch horror movies, I find them too scary. Now, I'm going to say this right now. That's fine. That's fine. You don't have to watch anything you don't want to watch. But that said, you're also kind of the perfect demographic for horror movies in a lot of ways, because you're going to feel something, and because at the end of the horror movie, you're going to emerge unscathed. You know, maybe a little rattled because it was scary, and I don't recommend doing this with every single horror movie. Some horror movies really are that scary.
They will psychologically damage you in some cases.
Maybe don't start with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but maybe watch Gremlins. You know, work your way up to it a bit. Maybe watch one of the Friday the 13th movies. They're scary, but they're kind of dumb. So that's fine. But, like, you have this opportunity with great cinema. Ebert called them machines that produce empathy. But they're also machines that just inject emotions into you. And they're a great way to live those emotions. And if, you know, you're finding yourself scared to watch a horror movie, you can overcome that fear really easily by just watching a horror movie. Watch it with some friends. Get some popcorn, leave the lights on, joke while you're watching it. You don't have to watch anything. But I encourage you to give the horror genre a try, because there's a lot of beautiful things in there, and I think a lot of people are a little scared of them. And that's fine if you're not ready for it. Totally fine. I never want anyone to do anything they're uncomfortable with. But I encourage you, there's a lot of great stuff you might be missing.
Here's a letter from Brian. Hello, Brian. Bibbs and Witney, in your discussion of Nosferatu, it was mentioned how most audiences don't watch silent films, and it got me thinking what drew me into them. The first silent film I connected with was Fritz Lang's Metropolis. More than it just being an amazing film, the story behind the film made me appreciate it even more. Viewing the film through the lens of the time it was made in Germany in the late 1920s against the backdrop of the rise of Hitler and the Nazi Party, and how that undoubtedly influenced the film. There are also numerous stories of how the film was nearly lost or destroyed over the years, only to have it a nearly complete print found in South America in 2008. The film survived, influencing everything from Superman to Star Wars to Blade Runner to Dr. Strangelove. My question is, are there any stories about a film that enhanced your enjoyment of it? Oh yeah, absolutely. Children of Paradise.
Okay.
Is this gigantic... Often... I don't like this nickname, but it's often called The French Gone with the Wind, just because it is similar in length and scope. But yeah, it's about... a mime and Lothario and the star that everybody is in love with, and sort of how the years pass and their changing relationships over the course of many years. And it is great. It's a wonderful, wonderful piece of cinema, maybe one of the best of all films, and I don't say that lightly. And when you learn about how difficult it was to make that, because it was made in France during the Nazi occupation, it becomes all the more impressive that they were able to make this kind of very personal, kind of subversive, incredibly expensive movie under the most stringent oversight possible. Makes it all the more astonishing.
Yeah, I really, when you do a lot of research into movies, you're going to find a lot of incredible stuff. And it's one of the things that really frustrates me when I see like junket interviews out of movies, and everyone's asking, like, Well, what's your greatest fear in this movie about fear? And I'm just like, I don't care. I want to find out stuff for posterity. This is a great opportunity where everything is still fresh in everyone's head. And yeah, they're going to speak positively about it. If it's a piece of crap, they're not going to
They'll turn on it after the release.
Yeah, they're contractually obligated to promote the movie right now, so they can't say anything too bad. And eventually they'll be able to say that. But you can still get really great production stories out of movies. So I love learning all of this stuff. But I think you kind of hit the nail on it. I love it when you find out how incredibly difficult it was. Because when you think about the best movies ever made, you get this impression that they're impeccably crafted and someone knew exactly what they were doing all the time. And they often had no fucking idea. And a great example of this is Casablanca.
Yes.
Considered one of the best movies ever made. Not going to put too far. I think there's things of it that have actually aged very poorly. That being said, it's very well crafted and it's a really good movie. They had no idea what the hell
understatement of the year.
They have no idea what they're doing most of the time while they were making that movie. In fact, there's a scene. It's one of the best scenes in the movie. And this is my understanding of it. And, these stories get filtered and maybe they're apocryphal. But this is the story I've heard. Where it's a scene where the Nazis are at Rick's bar and they are playing the German national anthem. And Rick nods to the band to play the Marseillaise instead. And Rick has stayed the fuck out of politics the entire time. This is a hugely important act for him as a character, also an intensely political act. And when they filmed that scene and they filmed that shot of Humphrey Bogart nodding to the band, they didn't know who he was nodding to or what it meant. They just knew it was going to cue something. And they figured it out later. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's an incredible thing.
Casablanca is so often gone to as like one of Hollywood's greatest films because it was the time it worked for Hollywood. Hollywood tries out everything that's popular and they repeat a lot of formulas. And that's all Casablanca is. It's a collection of stuff that was popular at the time. Exotic location, big stars that were contractually obligated to the studio, certain types of characters, certain types of lines, a certain type of pacing. Michael Curtiz, the director, he was an action guy. He did stuff like Captain Blood and, just these big swashbucklers. He wasn't known as a drama fellow, and he directed this as if it's an action movie, so it moves like this really big crackerjack kind of action film when you look at it from sort of an editing standpoint.
Doesn't have action in it, but it moves like
an action film. Everything just fell together perfectly that one time. There are films immediately before and immediately after that try all that same stuff, and it just didn't work quite as well. It's, in some cases, same big stars, same locations in many cases. They're just trying out everything that works. And for some reason, the stars just aligned with Casablanca. It was never destined to be. No film is ever destined to be. You hear all these stories during production, how, they had to go back and reshoot that. They do that with every single film.
Yeah,
they go back and reshoot stuff.
Reshoots are never a news story. Don't let anyone convince you it's special.
Yeah. Oh, no, they had to reshoot a scene in this big superhero blockbuster. They do that in every single movie.
They usually do. They realize, oh, shit, there's a shot we need in the editing room. We just didn't get it. It was a mistake. We messed up. We can go back there and do it. It takes a day. Done. And the movie will be better for it. Or, oh, man, we forgot to get, some dialogue explaining this plot point. We didn't realize how important it would be. Well, we'll shoot a little scene.
Yeah.
These are not horrible things. The movie doesn't suck. It's just, it's so huge that sometimes you miss a piece and you got to get it again later.
Here's a terrific story I learned recently about the James Cameron's The Terminator. There's a great shot in The Terminator near the end when the robot has been destroyed and we see a light sort of blink out of its eye, just sort of confirming that it's dead. They didn't have that shot of the robot dying. So the filmmakers got together and they had literally just this. A light bulb they bought at just a hardware store, sheets of tinfoil, and a cigarette. And they laid the camera down really close to this little light bulb that they got, this little red light that they picked up at a hardware store. They put tinfoil on either side of it, so it looked like it was this sort of metallic sheen around it. And they just blew cigarette smoke to give it kind of a moody atmosphere. That's it. They shot it for $5.
You wouldn't see the robot dying otherwise. They needed that shot.
So they went back, and that was a reshoot. This cheap-ass stuff, that's movie magic.
I think this is another one that was a reshoot, or it was added late in the game. But in John Carpenter's Halloween, there's this one shot. It's in the back of a car with Jamie Lee Curtis and her best friend, and Loomis, I think, and the actress's name is Loomis. And they're driving, and it's kind of like a long conversation, and it's just kind of getting to know their characters. And you realize the movie doesn't really need this shot. Why is this shot in the movie? It's the only shot in which Day turns to night. It's the only shot they had of a sunset because they didn't have one. It was in the middle of the day and then boom, night. They needed the transition because it felt weird just cutting to night like that. So shit, we need to do something. What do? We'll add this quick dialogue scene where we're at, and we'll shoot it at sunset. Boom.
All right.
That's a reshoot, or at least it was added late in the game because they didn't realize they needed it. These things happen. Very, very common. But it's fun to learn about them, isn't it?
Yes.
All right, so everybody, thank you very much for listening to Critically Acclaimed. Next week, again, we'll be back with reviews of Breaking In, Life of the Party, and the new anime film Lou Over the Wall. Head on over to Schmoville! At Facebook page to vote for the bad film by a good director we're going to review next week. Again, your options are Brian De Palma's Bonfire of the Vanities, Michael Mann's The Keep, and Alfred Hitchcock's Topaz. And, follow us on Twitter. I'm at William Bibbiani.
I'm at Witney Seibold.
You can also listen to us on our other podcast, Canceled Too Soon, where we review TV shows that lasted only one season or less. Join us. We're about to start our big third year of that podcast. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up. And,
everyone's a critic.
Yeah.
I want to go to the midnight show. I'm sorry, what?